Chapter 1 Evidence that God Exists.
Question: Do you have any concrete evidence that God exists?
Answer: Proof of the existence of God or a supreme divine authority figure has been an issue since the beginning of time. There are those who simply don't believe in a higher power, regardless of how hard they may try or want to have faith in Him. Rather, they require concrete evidence, proof of the claim that this entire creation was intelligently designed by a higher authority, someone who is immune to the effects of birth and death, heat and cold, happiness and distress. For the believers, those who have firm confidence in the existence of a singular divine entity, the questions pertaining to evidence supporting God's existence certainly seem silly. The devotee sees evidence of God's existence everywhere, at every corner of the globe and in every inch of ethereal space. Life itself is proof of spirit, for without the spiritual spark inside the body, an individual is deemed dead and useless. Just as there is life inside of a small body composed of matter, there is a more powerful life inside of the entire material cosmos. This superior spirit is responsible for all the workings of nature, thus any action, inward or outward, is evidence of the Supreme's potencies. Nevertheless, there will always be skeptics, and their main bone of contention will relate to evidence. In actuality, evidence is merely a product of the material senses, and thus it can never be concrete. Rather, everyone abides by some type of faith, regardless of their spiritual persuasion. The key is to take shelter of the right kind of evidence, i.e., have faith in the right people. Following this tangible belief system ultimately leads to the greatest benefit, which is proof enough of the claims made by the faithful. To understand the nature of evidence, let's work through a simple example of a situation that occurs quite frequently in real life. In America and other industrialized nations, automobile accidents are quite common. For those incidents involving two motorists who are behind the wheel, the causes and effects of the crash are quite obvious. Both parties perceived with their senses the events that led to the collision. In these instances, the evidence is the eyewitness account. Other times, however, there may not be any other parties around. The hit and run is a not-so-nice part of the life of a car owner. A person parks their car in a parking lot, goes into a store or shopping mall, and then returns to see that someone has hit their car. The other driver has left the scene, so there is no evidence showing who actually committed the crime. Yet sometimes there are supposed eyewitnesses who write down their observations. They will leave a note on the victim's car which lists the culprit's license plate number and a brief description of what occurred. What's interesting though, is that this note is not evidence enough to convict the accused of a crime, a fact which speaks to the nature of evidence and authority. A person could have witnessed the entire event firsthand and written about it on paper, but this description alone isn't enough to convict, with the reason being that anyone can write anything. Any person, regardless of what they saw or didn't see, could claim that another car hit a parked car. Sometimes the alleged criminal may even have dents and scratches on their car already. But regardless, there is always the possibility that the alleged criminal is innocent, that the person writing the note is either lying or has made a mistake. In these instances, it takes more evidence or proof to convict the criminal. Camera records are pulled and paint samples are matched. Even after finding all sorts of perceived evidence secured through an exhaustive investigation, the accusers still need to have definitive proof that the accused was driving the vehicle when the hit and run happened. All of this points to the subjective nature of evidence, how it can be perceived differently by different people. Evidence is merely a recorded version of sense perceptions. A person sees, hears, tastes, smells or touches something and then writes down their experience in a book, newspaper, website or journal. Descriptions of the experiences can also be orally transmitted to friends, family members and co-workers. This is how we take in all vital pieces of information. In school we read about famous figures of the past. For example, we only know that George Washington, the first president of the United States, existed because of the written evidence found in books. There are also paintings that were created, but again, the identification and authenticity of the paintings is determined by written evidence in addition to oral tradition passed down from generation to generation. For the skeptic, successfully nullifying evidence is very easy. Everyone is prone to making mistakes, cheating, having imperfect senses, and being easily illusioned. To err is human after all, so every one of us can make mistakes. Sometimes you can even have photographic evidence that is disputed. For example, in the National Football League, there are instant replay reviews of many controversial calls on the field. Invariably, there will be calls in a game where the announcers, referees, and players see the same video replay and reach different conclusions as to what occurred. Again, this speaks to the fact that every person has different sense perceptions, worldviews, ulterior motives, and levels of honesty. So how do we determine what is evidence? A doubting soul may ask what evidence is there of God's existence, but the same question can be posed to the original questioner. What proof is there that you exist? The person may retort with, well, I'm talking to you, aren't I? You are seeing me, aren't you? Isn't that proof enough? This is a very obvious answer that actually gives us insight into solving the question about God. Surely we know someone exists when we see them and interact with them. Now let's fast forward 100 years. Both questioners are now dead, yet what proof is there that either person existed? If someone had written down their observations in a book and that book happened to be preserved for over 100 years, then we could surely use that as evidence. Similarly, if the third party's observations were verbally transmitted to a dependent, who then subsequently passed the same information down to other dependents, we could take that verbal affirmation as evidence of existence. This situation validates the claim that one's perceptions don't diminish or increase over time. If I say that someone else exists today, my statement doesn't lose value over time, nor does it become truer. The truth is the truth, the perception is the perception. Whether we fast forward 100 years or 10,000 years, the sense perceptions are still the same, hence the evidence is always valid. At this point, a skeptic could question the validity of the initial perception, claiming it to be flawed. After all, everyone has made mistakes, even the greatest of scientists. There was a time when a consensus of scientists believed that the Earth was flat. They were all eventually proved wrong, so in the end their supposed evidence wasn't proof of anything. So how do we determine the validity and authenticity of evidence? There is no surefire way. Rather, each of us takes evidence based on authority. This authority is determined by the person accepting the evidence. Again, this speaks to the fact that evidence is subjective and something that requires faith. Therefore, for followers of the Vedic tradition, empirical evidence is not as important as the faith that is ascribed to the statements of those deemed as authority figures. What this means is that it is more important to see the results of having faith in evidence than actually arguing over the authenticity of the evidence itself. So far, this discussion is completely theoretical, so to understand the issue more clearly, let's use the example of a set of scriptures that is currently perceivable, the Vedas. In India, the spiritual traditions date back so far that no one can actually come up with a concrete date for their inception. These traditions descend from the Vedas, scriptural works which purportedly come from God. The Vedas have no date of inception because God Himself is eternal. The concepts of time and space are merely products of the material world, representing the limits to the thinking abilities of the human brain. In the spiritual world, there is no such thing as time and space, or at least their influences are completely irrelevant. Therefore, God and anything He creates, including knowledge, has no beginning and no end. The Vedas not only inform us of God's existence, but also of His various descents to the world that we currently inhabit. These appearances are for the purposes of annihilating miscreants and pleasing devotees, those conditioned souls who sincerely desire the association of the Supreme Spirit. Each time the Lord comes to earth, He assumes a different visible transcendental form and takes to different activities. In days past, the sense perceptions of those who were around during the Lord's descents to earth were passed down through an oral tradition. Later on, these same accounts were written down into wonderful epics such as the Ramayana, Mahabharata and Puranas. These books themselves are evidence of God's existence. Mostly authored by Vyasadeva, the classic Vedic texts describe in great detail God's names, forms, pastimes, appearances, associates, family members, and the geographical locations of his noteworthy activities. Simply based off Vyasadeva's writings, we have loads of evidence of God's existence and his teachings. Though Vedic wisdom is quite comprehensive, the ultimate instruction is that one should simply surrender unto the Lord in his personal form as Krishna and be freed from all sins. In addition, Krishna has multitudes of non-different forms such as Vishnu, Rama, Narasimha and Chaitanya, which can also be surrendered to. Though the events documented in Vyasadeva's works occurred many thousands of years ago, there is no reason to doubt their ever having taken place. The exploits of Sri Krishna and Lord Rama are so widely known that they are documented in many books, not just one or two. At this point, the skeptic will argue that since the evidence provided by Vyasadeva describes events of the paranormal, such as talking monkeys and children lifting gigantic hills, it must be mythology or something untrue. In addition, the fact that no one can accurately date these events should only further discredit their authenticity. Some can't even fathom that a single entity, one man, Vyasadeva, could have written so much in one lifetime. Therefore, they even doubt the authenticity and existence of such a person. This behavior is quite humorous, as Vyasadeva's greatness and authenticity of authorship is mentioned within the works themselves by exalted sages and respectable personalities. As mentioned before, a sense observation doesn't lose its validity over time. Just because Vyasadeva wrote the Mahabharata thousands of years ago doesn't mean that the events described within didn't happen. Indeed, he even carefully noted down the distinct constellation of stars prior to the famous Bharat War. Analyzing the movements of stars, some scientists have deduced that such a constellation could only have occurred a long time in the past. If we think about it, it's ironic that the people doubting the authenticity of Rama and Krishna can only raise such doubts because they know of both personalities. For instance, how can we doubt that someone exists when we know who they are, where they were born, what they look like, and when they appeared on earth? High Court judges and scholars have concluded that there is no tangible evidence to prove Lord Rama existed, but is not the Ramayana evidence enough? Maharshi Valmiki met Lord Rama and wrote down his observations in a very lengthy Sanskrit poem. Moreover, Rama's existence is validated in countless other classic Vedic texts. What need is there to prove anything? Rather, how do we even know that these scholars and high court judges exist? In a few hundred years, through the use of skepticism, others can similarly doubt that these past silly judgments were ever made.
Rama is like a mad elephant in battle. He has a purified and unblemished family lineage for his trunk, brilliance and splendor for his excitement, and two powerful arms for tusks. O Ravana, you are not even qualified to look at him. Marika speaking to Ravana, Valmiki Ramayana, Aranya Kanda, 31.46.
Many people saw Krishna and Rama directly and still didn't believe that they were God. Such individuals didn't even have to rely on the written word of Vyasadeva or the claims of evidence provided by others. They got to experience God's splendor directly. During Lord Rama's time, the Rakshasa demon Ravana failed to acknowledge Rama's divine nature. The Rakshasa Marika, on one occasion, had attacked the venerable Vishwamitra Muni during the time of a sacrifice. Rama, at the time a young child, was there with Vishwamitra to protect him. Shooting an arrow at Marika, Rama launched the demon hundreds of miles away into an ocean. Thus Marika had first-hand knowledge of Rama's supreme powers. He subsequently warned Ravana not to anger the Lord or fight against him. Marika's words were evidence of Rama's divine nature, yet Ravana refused to accept them. In the end, this denial would cost him his royal opulence, worldwide fame, position as an object of fear, and ultimately his life. Similarly, there was an impostor king named Pondraka during Lord Krishna's time who was claiming to be the real Vasudeva, which is another name for Krishna. He claimed that the real Krishna was simply a fake and that he needed to stop pretending to be God. So this fool saw Lord Krishna in person and still refused to accept him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord would go on to teach this impostor a lesson. But this incident further illustrates the fact that for those who want to remain in the material world and pretend to be God themselves, no amount of evidence, visual or otherwise, is sufficient enough to prove the authenticity of God's existence. For every individual, the authenticity of evidence is always determined by faith and authority. We view a person or entity as authoritative and thus believe whatever evidence they present to us. This is indeed the same tact followed by the devotees of Krishna. A follower of the Vedic tradition takes Vyasadeva, Valmiki, and other great saints as authority figures. Whatever evidence they provide is willingly accepted. But more important than evidence and faith is the action that is taken as a result. The unmatched, fixed transcendental position achieved by those who follow the prescriptions of the authorized Acharyas is evidence enough of the authenticity of the Vedas and their founder. To illustrate this point more clearly, let's review some common behavioral traits exhibited by the average person. Surely average can mean anything, but with this example, the behavior can apply to any person, regardless of their belief in God or lack thereof. When the average person leaves the home in the morning, they are placing faith in their fellow man to not harm them. Based on their experiences of days past, sense perceptions which have since been stored in memory, the individual leaving the home has faith that no one will kill them, run into them with their car, or attack them when they step out the door. When such a person is driving to work in their car, they have faith that other drivers will adhere to the traffic laws, especially when traveling through a green light. When we drive through an intersection with a green light, it means that the crossing traffic has a red light, which is an indication to stop. If a driver who is on the crossing side does not adhere to this red light, they will enter the intersection at the same time that the other cars are passing. Hence, a fatal accident could easily occur. But the first driver has faith based on past empirical evidence that the drivers on the other side will adhere to their red light. As mentioned before, every person is bound to make mistakes and perceive things incorrectly. Therefore, there is no 100% guarantee that every other driver will adhere to red lights and stop signs. We willingly drive through intersections with green lights because we have faith in the previous evidence that was accumulated. This practice, when attached to the right type of evidence, can actually unlock the secret to the spiritual kingdom. Every one of us takes to activity with a desired positive outcome in mind. The nature of the positive condition can vary, but the end goal is that of a favorable situation. When activities eventually lead to their intended goal, we develop faith in the evidence that served as the impetus for taking up that activity. In this way, we see that the only way to prove God's existence is to take to the activities that He prescribes. For the people of this age, the great Vaishnava authorities, the devotees who have a firm belief in the existence of Lord Vishnu, Krishna and his avatars, recommend that we all take to bhakti yoga or devotional service as a way of life. The quintessential act of bhakti is the chanting of the holy names of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Along with abstaining from meat-eating, gambling, intoxication, and illicit sex, the assertive processes of devotional service will lead to the most favorable of conditions. Since these activities bring about a change of consciousness, they lead to the emancipation of the soul, the release from the cycle of birth and death. Everyone is looking for some pleasure, but the practices commonly adopted to secure such enjoyment fail in every regard. Even the engagements that do bring about some temporary happiness are riddled with negative side effects. The evidence provided by Vyasadeva and the Vedas in general is not meant to be accepted blindly. As mentioned before, any evidence, regardless of how obvious it may seem, can be invalidated through the use of skepticism. Therefore, we should have some faith in the beginning and take to the recommended processes that constitute bhakti yoga. Arjuna, Lord Krishna's dear friend, was always in the mindset of bhakti, so he was able to see Krishna for who he was, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The proof is in the pudding, so if we follow the instructions of the spiritual masters and the Supreme Lord himself, we will soon be able to tell for ourselves if the Vedas are authentic and if Krishna really is the ultimate reservoir of pleasure. Chapter 2, Shyamasundara.
Question: Is Krishna really blue?
Answer: It certainly seems strange that followers of the Vedic tradition would worship a god who appears bluish. After all, we've never encountered anyone who had this appearance in our worldly affairs. In fact, the term black and blue refers to the appearance of a bruise, which is a mark seen on the surface of the body after it has been hurt in some way. Yet the followers of the Vedic tradition didn't just concoct this idea of a blue god, but rather they take it from authority that the Supreme Personality of Godhead indeed has an ever-existing transcendental form, which is the most beautiful and most attractive in all the worlds. The highest bliss, transcendental or otherwise, can be realized by regularly drinking the sweet mellows of this divine vision. The common misconception is that Hindus believe in many gods. There are certainly many godlike figures such as Ganesha, Shiva, Brahma, and Durga, but such personalities merely represent the height of material opulence in the mode of goodness. In essence, these divine figures, who are worthy of the highest respect and adoration from mankind, represent the Supreme Lord's close family, his faithful servants and deputies. The Supreme Lord is singular, so he is one without a second. In many spiritual disciplines, this singular divine entity is known by the name of God, but the Vedas don't limit the Supreme Lord to only one name. Rather, he can be addressed through limitless, unique sound vibrations which each reference a specific attribute, pastime, or quality of the Lord. Since the Lord enacts so many pastimes, he takes many different forms, some visible and some not. Several of these forms kindly descend to earth from time to time, while others remain in the spiritual sky for the benefit of the eternally liberated associates. Though there are countless forms, as many as there are waves in the ocean, there is still a fountainhead, an original from which all others emanate. This original personality is Krishna. The Sanskrit word Krishna has several different meanings. It can mean dark or blackish. It can also mean all attractive. Since the original divine entity possesses both of these attributes, Krishna is the most appropriate name for him. The Supreme Lord is the most attractive person in existence, and attraction to him is anything but fatal. Attraction to beautiful men and women can be damaging in the sense that it can lure a person into doing something they otherwise wouldn't do. In this respect, enchantment can lead to loss of rationale and the taking to harmful activities. For those who associate directly with the original transcendental, all-attractive form of the Lord, there is no risk of danger because there is no illusion or detrimental enchantment. Rather, it is the essential characteristic of the spirit soul to be a lover of Krishna. So once this soul is reunited with its divine lovable object, it immediately regains its infinite knowledgeable and blissful position. How do we know what Krishna looks like? Just as with any other important piece of information, knowledge of Krishna is taken from authority. Those who have seen him personally have shared their experiences with others and also written them down in books. This information has been since passed down from generation to generation. Additionally, houses of worship have been erected which depict the Lord in his various forms, performing different activities. Through consultation with such authorized information, we come to understand what Krishna looks like, what makes him happy and what doesn't, and moreover, what it takes to gain his association. While it seems strange that Krishna would be blue in color, the exact characterization of his complexion is that of a dark rain cloud. The Lord is described as Shyama, which can mean dark bluish greenish like the color of the tamala tree, or more simply like the dark blue rain cloud. Since Krishna is exquisitely beautiful, another one of his names is Shyamasundara. The descriptions of the Lord's personal appearances found in sacred texts like the Srimad Bhagavatam and Mahabharata are incredibly accurate in that the compilers of these works didn't just create a new color on their own which could be misconstrued in the future. Rather, they carefully observed nature around them and found those things which matched Krishna's appearance. Of all the objects they observed, nothing came closer to matching up with Krishna's complexion than the dark rain cloud. Though we may not know anyone who possesses a bluish complexion today, we can most certainly witness the beautiful color of the cloud which is about to pour down rain. In fact, depending on the time and circumstance, one can see this cloud in the sky and immediately be reminded of Krishna. The great Vaishnava saint and poet, Goswami Tulsidas, described his mood of devotion and his ultimate conclusion in life by discussing the dark rain cloud and a specific type of bird which is enamored by it. While Krishna is the original form of Godhead, his direct expansion is Lord Vishnu, who possesses a similar complexion but is more opulently dressed and possesses 4 hands instead of 2. Vishnu then incarnates into various forms which appear on earth. Among Vishnu's chief incarnations, probably the most celebrated is Lord Rama, the handsome and pious prince of Ayodhya who roamed the earth many thousands of years ago. Tulsidas was especially devoted to Rama, though he made no distinctions between Rama, Vishnu and Krishna. All three have the same bodily complexion, for even Marika, an infamous Rakshasa demon, describes in the Ramayana that Rama's body is of the Shyama complexion.
At the time there were not yet visible any signs of manhood on the boy's beautiful face, which was dark blue in complexion Shyama and had an all-auspicious gaze. Rama had a gold chain round his neck, a small tuft of hair on his head, wore only one piece of clothing and held a bow in his hands. Marika speaking to Ravana about Rama during his youth, Valmiki Ramayana, Aranyakanda 38.14.
When a person is on the highest platform of transcendental love, they lose interest in all the terms and concepts associated with the study of self-realization and religion. In this topmost stage, the pure devotee is only interested in associating with the Supreme Lord in a loving way, so there is no concern for adherence to rules of etiquette or specific terms of spiritual practice. Advanced terminology and vocabulary are difficult to comprehend for the average person, so poets often prefer using analogies and similes to explain high concepts. Tulsidas, in attempting to describe his love for Rama, makes a comprehensive comparison to the Chatak bud. Descriptions of this comparison are found in his Dohavali. In this work, Tulsidas states his desire to be just like the Chatak bud, which only drinks rainwater. This bird is praised because its beak is constantly faced upwards while it stares at the dark rain cloud. This cloud bears the closest resemblance to Rama Krishna, so Tulsidas praises the bird for its level of devotion. Since the bird only drinks the water poured down from this cloud, Tulsidas states that for the bird's benefit, it is better for it not to rain. Rather, if only a few raindrops fall every now and then, the level of love and devotion shown by the bird will remain intact. If the rain cloud shows too much direct affection to the Chatak in the form of showers of rain, the bird might become lax in its devotion and start to view its lovable object as an order supplier. Pure love is practiced when there is absolutely no expectation of reciprocation. In this way, Goswami Tulsidas informs us that the dealings between the Chatak bird and the rain cloud represent the highest level of spiritual practice. Tulsidas also states that the Chatak, as the object representing a pure devotee, teaches its dependents to not turn its beak away from the rain cloud even at the time of death or when the last rites are performed. This shows that Tulsidas believes that thinking of Rama at all times, even when one is about to die, is the highest religious practice. Moreover, he wanted to make sure that future generations knew exactly what his primary dharma in life was. He only wanted to look at the beautiful body of the Lord and never think of anything or anyone else. This behavior represents love in the mood of separation, a method which provides the topmost bliss to both the giver and the receiver. Sri Rama is satisfied by the devotee who is always looking at him with loyalty, dedication and love. The Chatak bird renounces all kith and kin and refuses to accept any other water except that which emanates from its beloved rain cloud. In the same manner, the pure devotee refuses to acknowledge the existence of anything not directly related to Krishna. The devotee only humbly accepts prasadam or the Lord's mercy, even though there is no expectation or desire for this mercy. In the highest stage of transcendental love, the separated devotee derives the greatest pleasure simply by offering their love without motive. In order for this love to be practiced, the Supreme Lord, through his bodily complexion which is like that of the dark rain cloud, must be a giver of supreme transcendental pleasure. It is for this reason that the Vaishnavas, those who eventually disregard any and all mundane rules and regulations of religion, take to devotional service as their only engagement in life. Not only is Krishna's appearance beautiful, but so are the transcendental sound vibrations of his various names. Just as the beautiful complexion of the rain cloud brings sweet pleasure to the eyes of the chatak bird, the names Krishna and Rama can bring the same level of pleasure to the ears of the love-starved conditioned living entities. Therefore, the highest engagement for the people of this age is to regularly chant the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, while thinking of their beloved bluish Lord through separation. Worship of a personal God is condemned in many circles, but this restriction is certainly not authorized by the Vedas. After all, every person in this world is looking for pleasure, even the animals. If the Supreme Lord is lacking a transcendental form possessing full variegatedness, how can he please anyone? Moreover, if the form of the personality of Godhead is denied, people will be more apt to worship those who do possess a form. This means that instead of worshipping God, man will worship dog. Actually, this already happens, as people regularly bow down and serve their pets by picking up their waste deposits off of sidewalks and other public areas. And yet the bowing down to a deity form of the Supreme Lord is strictly condemned by religious leaders whose purported aim it is to bring transcendental pleasure, that which transcends the bonds of life and death, to the conditioned souls. This certainly doesn't seem logical, nor does it square with the constitutional position of the soul. The Vedas tell us that this world is merely a shadow copy of the same realm that exists in the spiritual world. Since there is variegatedness in this world in the form of different bodies and material qualities, there certainly must be variety in the spiritual world. Otherwise, wherefrom has this variety come? If variety is absent in the spiritual world, how can it manifest in the material world? By denying the form of the personality of Godhead and the variety of his activities and pastimes, the spiritual world is essentially deemed a place inferior to the material world. If the material world thus becomes superior, what need is there of entering the kingdom of God? The point to religion, or a bona fide spiritual practice, is to find pleasure. Since we currently reside in a perverted copy of an original realm which is always pure, the enjoyment we experience is checked. Yet by kindly turning our heads towards the dark rain cloud-like body of the Supreme Lord, the answer to all our problems can be found. Krishna is all-attractive, and anyone who associates with him on a regular basis can attest to this fact. By taking to the worship of this bluish deity, the rain cloud of transcendental love will pour its kind offerings on us all. Chapter 3, Muralidhara.
Question. Krishna is often depicted holding and playing a flute. Is there any special significance to this flute?
Answer. There are certainly different forms of the original personality of Godhead, the almighty entity that we know as God. The varieties in appearance speak to the different natures of man. Not only are there varieties in the human species, but in fact there are up to 8,400,000 different forms of life, each of which has its own tendencies, desires and activities that bring it pleasure. Only one person is the father of every species, and hence only one person knows how to please everyone. This entity is so potent that by taking to self-pleasing activities, he can attract the hearts and minds of those who are dying to offer their service in a pure and loving way. As the ultimate reservoir of pleasure, the Supreme Lord simply has to engage in one of his innumerable sports to give pleasure to those who are intimately associated with him, the devotees. Of all the forms of Godhead, only the original Lord Krishna is capable of instigating the highest transcendental mellow, or rasa, from the purified soul. Not surprisingly, Krishna's flute plays an integral role in this divine enchantment. Why are there different forms of Godhead if Krishna can just play his flute and attract everyone? Depending on the time and circumstance, mankind will not be so willing to bring forth his natural loving propensity. The loving propensity is a quality derived from the natural properties of the spirit soul. This shouldn't surprise us, for though it manifests in different ways, love is all around. Love in the mundane sense is directed towards one's neighbor, friend, countryman, government leaders, parents, or paramour. Even hate is a product of the loving propensity, a total inversion of the emotion. When intense love gets reversed, it turns into hatred. As individual autonomous units of energy, we have free will in our actions. But this doesn't mean that we have independence as far as results go, for every other individual has their own free will to act upon their desires. The power of the individual comes from the soul, which is an expansion of the Supreme Spirit. Not surprisingly, this most powerful spiritual entity is the Supreme Lord. Depending on the time, circumstance, and understanding of the members of society, the divine entity is addressed by different names. In the Vedic tradition, the name Krishna is considered the best because it speaks to the divine's most important feature, attractiveness. Only God can attract everyone, hence the name Krishna, which means all attractive, becomes most appropriate. Nevertheless, Lord Krishna in his original all-attractive form doesn't necessarily remain in the material world at all times. His presence is certainly felt everywhere, as not a blade of grass can move without his sanction, but this influence is of the secondary variety. Krishna is in everything, but not everything is in Krishna. How is God's influence felt on earth? As mentioned before, the individual spirit soul, which is part and parcel of Krishna, forms the basis of identity and action. Yet the results of action are distributed by the Supersoul, a non-different expansion of Krishna which resides within the heart next to the individual soul. They say that the size of the individual soul, or Jivatma, is akin to a tiny fragment of the tip of a human hair, and that the size of the Supersoul is akin to the size of a thumb. Both of these measurements are relative to the particular body. For every living entity, even a tiny ant has the Supersoul residing within. The size of the Supersoul is proportionate to the size of the individual. Irrespective of size, both souls are very powerful, yet the Supersoul has greater capabilities. The Supersoul is responsible for the memory of previous experiences and the awakening of divine consciousness. Since the soul is similar in makeup to God, it is ever existing, it cannot be destroyed in any way. The outer covering of the soul, the body, is temporary, thus the soul can travel from different body types one after another, life after life. Once a new body is assumed, i.e. when the event known as birth takes place, experiences from previous lives are forgotten. Moreover, when untrapped in a particular outer covering, the individual only remains conscious of its own activities. An individual might become aware of what others are thinking and feeling, but this is only accomplished through external interaction. The soul never travels into another person's body. Even in the case of powerful yogis who can travel through space with their souls, there is no way to become conscious of what every single person is thinking. The Supersoul, on the other hand, resides within every individual, and since it is non-different from God, the Supreme Lord automatically becomes the most knowledgeable entity. He is conscious of the thoughts, activities, and desires of every single viable living entity, past, present, and future. When the individual soul takes to connecting with the Supersoul, the activity is known as yoga. When yoga is achieved in a perfect state, the individual is taken back to the spiritual realm, their original home. Once having returned, the purified spiritual sparks remain forever in Krishna's association, enjoying his company by playing an active role in the Lord's sportive exploits. Achieving perfect yoga is not easy, so for the benefit of the conditioned souls illusioned by their contact with material nature, the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna himself, descends to earth in various visible forms. Generally, the difference between the Supersoul and the incarnations is described in terms of Nirguna and Saguna. Nirguna means without material qualities, and Saguna means with material qualities. The Supreme Lord, as the creator of matter, can never become subject to its influence. Hence, he is never Saguna. Nirguna and Saguna are from the perspective of the conditioned entity, who is unable to properly conceive of the Lord's immensely powerful and gigantic transcendental form. The avatars or Saguna forms are representations of the same Supreme Lord residing within the heart as the Supersoul. So what functions do these avatars perform? Depending on time and circumstance, specific activities are taken to. Sometimes there is a particular devilish character running around causing havoc, so the Lord takes to diminishing the effect of this cancer on society. Sometimes there are issues pertaining to evil kings who are enslaving innocent people. The Lord then personally appears or sends one of his authorized representatives to free the oppressed people and provide them a road map for spiritual enlightenment. Sometimes there is a particularly demoniac king disturbing the activities of the saintly people. Depending on the capabilities of the king and the boons previously given to him, the Lord will take on a form that meets the criteria necessary for eradicating such a miscreant. Lord Krishna himself, the original personality of Godhead, appeared on this earth some 5,000 years ago. On the surface there seemed to be an outward cause, that of the influences of a monarch named Kamsa. According to a prophecy told to him, Kamsa was to be killed by the eighth son of his sister Devaki. After killing her first 7 children, Kamsa eagerly anticipated the birth of the eighth. To fulfill the prophecy, and to rid the world of the harmful effects of Kamsa, Sri Krishna, in a diminutive form, appeared from the womb of Mother Devaki as her eighth child. Through a series of interconnected events, Krishna made his way to Vrindavana in his youth, where he would remain for some years until the time was right for Kamsa's demise. Eventually Kamsa would be killed directly by Krishna in a fight, and the primary purpose for the Lord's advent would be fulfilled. What's unique about Krishna's personal appearance on earth is that although there were outward purposes, the primary driving force of the Lord's activities was pleasure. In previous incarnations, the Lord was duty-bound to specific forms, rules and regulations. This isn't to say that the Supreme Lord can ever be compelled to do anything, but in order to pay respect to the wishes of close associates, the Lord voluntarily abided by certain codes of conduct. In his incarnation as the warrior Prince Rama, God adhered to the rules of chivalry and honor assigned to the Kshatriya or warrior caste. In his incarnation as the half-man half-lion, Narsimhadeva, the Lord killed the demoniac king Hiranyakashipu in a way specific enough to not break any of the boons previously given to the king by the demigod Lord Brahma. In his incarnation as Lord Buddha, Krishna purposefully spoke against the authority of the Vedas in order to stop the degraded practice of animal sacrifice. As Parashurama, Krishna took to extreme violence, killing the entire Kshatriya race many times over. In his original form, Krishna is only interested in pleasurable activities. Therefore, the pastimes and actions most remembered by devotees, those events that evoke the strongest transcendental loving feelings, are the ones enacted in Vrindavana during Krishna's youth. Though Krishna appeared from the womb of a woman married to a member of the warrior caste, Krishna's foster parents were of the mercantile order, Vaishyas. Thus Krishna grew up on a farm, tending cows with his fellow friends and neighbors. It is seen that since in the country children have much more room to play, they will spend a large portion of the day running around on various fields and enjoying playful activities. Krishna was no different in this regard, the only difference was the effect of his activities. Krishna was no ordinary boy, and neither were his friends any ordinary children. Krishna's associates were of the highest consciousness, yogis practicing the ancient art of bhakti. Their level of devotion was so great that they didn't even know what bhakti was. Oftentimes there are debates as to which type of yoga is superior. Some take to yoga through intense meditation, while others take to the analytical study of the differences between matter and spirit. Bhakti, however, is always superior because it is the only form of yoga that never stops and never diminishes. Bhakti is the essence of spiritual life, the natural disposition of the soul. Only in bhakti does the yogi forget even what yoga is. When in the presence of superior company, all mundane rules, regulations and distinctions are immediately forgotten. Krishna's beautiful form is enough to bring supreme pleasure to the eyes. In fact, they say that Krishna's body is so beautiful that the ornaments he wears actually become enhanced in appearance because they are placed on the Lord's exquisite body. Normally ornaments work the other way around. They enhance the beauty of the objects they are placed onto. Goswami Tulsidas, our favorite Vaishnava poet, makes a similar observation in his Gitavali, a devotional poem which includes descriptions of the childhood activities of Sri Rama, Krishna's incarnation in the Treta Yuga as a handsome prince. Lord Rama, whose body is similar in complexion to Krishna's, was also nicely decorated with ornaments and jewelry in his childhood, as is the custom for mothers of the Vedic tradition to do. Rama's ornaments were slightly different, as he wore a necklace with a lion's toenail on it for protection. Nevertheless, the effects were still the same, as the jewelry and accessories took on their true value once they dangled from the transcendental body of the Lord. There is a common saying that men fall in love with their eyes and women fall in love with their ears. Though the validity of such a statement can be debated, the effect that Krishna had on the ears of his transcendental associates cannot. Through the sweet melodious sounds emanating from his flute, Krishna enraptured the hearts and minds of his Gopa friends, the cowherd boys of the neighborhood. But the reach of sound is far greater than the reach of sight, so the playing of the Lord's flute would touch all the residents of Vrindavana, including the cowherd women, the gopis. Though most of these women were married, they fell completely in love with Krishna simply by seeing him and hearing the sound of his flute. In fact, the gopis represent the upper limit of devotion, the highest perfectional stage that anyone, be they a yogi, karmi or janani, can ascend to. The gopis' minds are always fixed on Krishna, irrespective of the task they are engaged in. Even when taking part in household chores, the gopis could meditate on Krishna by remembering his form and hearing the sound of his flute. Their level of devotion was so high that simply by hearing the music produced by Krishna's flute, they could perfectly understand the intricate workings of economics. The gopis would think that the flute itself was extremely benefited by being able to touch Krishna's lips. Even the tree that created the flute was benefited. Keeping the chain of causation going, the ground that held the tree that created the flute that touched Krishna's lips was also spiritually uplifted due to the role it played in the final outcome. Going even further, the flowers that surrounded the tree that created the flute that touched the lips of the wielder of the flute, Muralidhara, who gave transcendental pleasure to the residents of Rajabhumi, were also forever spiritually benefited. Our everyday material products are created through a similar chain of action, with numerous unrelated individuals performing independent actions driven by self-interest that eventually lead to the benefit of the end user of the product. The gopis took this simple, yet often overlooked, reality of economics and went one step further. They not only understood how the flute was made, but they realized how the resultant object could be used to bring spiritual merit to the actors and activities responsible for its creation. Is there any special significance to the flute? Why the flute over any other type of instrument? The shortest answer is a question: why not the flute? Sri Krishna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the only person in the world that doesn't have to listen to anyone. If he takes pleasure in playing the flute, who are we to say that he should take to any other instrument? The flute is actually always with Krishna, even in the spiritual world. Penetrating the material elements that cover the soul, transcendental sound vibrations serve as the most effective way to liberate one from the clutches of material existence. These sound vibrations can take the form of words of instruction from the devotees and songs of praise directed at the Supreme Lord, but the most potent sound vibration is that emanating from the flute of the Supreme Lord. Lord Krishna, though growing up in a farm community, later took on the role of a king and married many princesses. Sometimes Krishna was fighting enemies in his adult years, but sometimes he played a more passive role, as he did on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where he served as his cousin Arjuna's charioteer. Though Krishna is the worshipable object of the Brahmanas, Brahmanya Devai, sometimes he took instruction from spiritual masters to set a good example for the rest of society. Though Krishna was a family man engaged in various daily functions pertaining to home and society, he was the most renounced person, as was exhibited by his separation from his loving associates in Vrindavana. Not only were the Gopas and Gopis firmly attached to Krishna in an unbreakable bond of transcendental love, but so was Krishna attached to them in the same way. Yet due to the outward cause of having to deal with miscreants, Krishna left Vrindavana behind and spent the rest of his years on earth as a king in Mathura and Dwaraka. Sri Krishna once mentioned many of these apparently contradictory qualities in a conversation with his principal wife, Rukmini. Wanting to play with Rukmini a little bit, Krishna sarcastically asked her why she was attracted to him, for he was not qualified in any way to have such an exalted princess for a wife. Though Krishna was joking, Rukmini retorted that Krishna was indeed correct in his assertions, for as the Supreme Lord, no material designation could accurately be tagged to him. No one could figure out what caste he belonged to, for even other kings would ridicule Krishna for having tended to cows in his youth. No one could understand his financial disposition either, for although he was the protector of Dwaraka, he wasn't necessarily the acknowledged ruler of the community. Lord Krishna did not belong to any of the modes of material nature, goodness, passion or ignorance, because as the Supreme Lord, he was transcendental to all of them, something understood perfectly by Rukmini Devi. In this way, Rukmini firmly established Krishna as the most complete manifestation of the eternal personality of Godhead to ever appear on this earth. Not only is Krishna not beholden to any rules and regulations, but neither are his closest associates. The highest transcendental mellow, that of Madhurya Rasa, can only be tasted with Krishna, the wielder of the transcendental flute. In the spiritual sky there is the original realm of Vrindavana, the ever-existing land where the sounds of Krishna's flute are heard every day. Only those with a pure mind and heart can go there. By always remembering the images of the Lord holding his flute and enjoying with his best friends, one can ensure that the required purification will be achieved, and that at the time of death, the return ticket to Muralidhara's realm will be kindly given as a reward. Chapter 4, Vishnu and Krishna.
Question: why is Krishna's incarnation considered to be an incarnation of Vishnu when Vishnu is an expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is Krishna?
Answer: in the Vedic tradition, the Supreme Divine Being is known as Krishna. He is described as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, since there are multitudes of non-different forms of the Divine, which can also be worshipped with love and devotion, with the devotee of each particular form reaping the same benefits. This isn't to say that there are many gods, but rather that the Supreme Lord isn't so stingy to limit himself to only one form. Just as there are different inherent qualities possessed by different individuals, there are different ways to offer love and devotion to the Supreme Divine Entity. Therefore this original personality, who is known as Krishna, takes to various forms to allow the devotees to worship him in their preferred transcendental mellow or rasa. Ironically enough, one of Krishna's primary expansions is so much loved and respected that he is often taken as the original form of Godhead instead of Krishna. This person is Lord Vishnu, who is also known as Narayana, the source of all men. For millions of years, only Vishnu was known as the original personality of Godhead. In many sacred texts, Krishna is listed as one of Narayana's primary incarnations. While there appears to be a contradiction on this issue, there actually isn't one. First, let's cover the basis for Krishna being taken as the original form of Godhead. The Vedas are the ancient scriptures of India, and they literally mean knowledge. Originally, such transcendental information was passed through an oral tradition, with hymns and prayers memorized and verbalized in the Sanskrit language. Later on, this same information was put into written form. Since the attributes and features of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are unlimited, many books were written, with each one focusing on a particular aspect of the divine. Of all the texts that were compiled, authorities consider the Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavata Purana to be the most important. This text stands apart from other major Vedic works since it focuses almost entirely on Vishnu worship and the life and pastimes of Krishna. Other Vedic texts often deal with the four rewards of life: dharma, religiosity; artha, economic development; kama, sense gratification; and moksha, release from the cycle of birth and death, and how one can go about achieving them. While the alleviation of pains and discomforts are certainly legitimate areas of interest in spirituality, the highest truth is that the individual spirit souls are part and parcel of God. Eternally separate and almost equal is the concise definition. God is the supreme soul, and we are minute fragments emanating from Him. Due to our constitutional makeup, our natural disposition, or dharma, is to always be engaged in His service, tied to His hip through the bonds of love and devotion. The Srimad Bhagavatam states that Lord Vishnu, the four-armed form of the original personality of Godhead residing in the Vaikuntha spiritual realm, is certainly God. For the benefit of mankind, He kindly descends to earth in various guises from time to time. Though these expansions, known as avatars, appear to be just like ordinary living entities, they are non-different from the original Lord. Therefore, they are always completely spiritual, not tinged by the effects of material nature governed by the energy of Maya. While the Bhagavatam deals extensively with Lord Vishnu, His pastimes, His attributes, and His features, Lord Krishna, who possesses two arms and an all-attractive transcendental body, is also taken to be the original form of Godhead. His home is in a spiritual land known as Golok Vrindavana, which is similar in nature to Vaikuntha. Both Vaikuntha and Vrindavana are places where birth and death do not occur. Therefore, whoever lives there remains liberated from conditioned life. Lord Chaitanya, who is taken by great authorities to be an incarnation of Krishna, appeared on earth around 500 years ago and preached worship of Krishna to be the topmost spiritual practice. He was especially fond of the Srimad Bhagavatam and another Vedic text known as the Brahma Sanhita. This treatise was compiled by Lord Brahma, the first created being who lives for billions and billions of years. Brahma is considered a demigod or an elevated living entity. Since he too must go through birth and death, he is not considered to be on an equal footing with Vishnu. Lord Brahma once compiled a great set of prayers in praise of Govinda, which is another name for Krishna. So simply based off the Srimad Bhagavatam and Brahma Sanhita, we can understand that Krishna is the origin of all forms of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya also discussed in great detail the differences between Krishna, Vishnu, and other avatars. These discussions are found in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and anyone who is further interested in this subject matter is advised to consult this wonderful text. Lord Chaitanya inaugurated the chanting of the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, as the topmost religious practice for all the people of this age. Rama refers to Lord Rama, one of Vishnu's most celebrated incarnations who appeared on earth many thousands of years ago in the guise of a warrior prince. Though he stressed worship of Krishna, Lord Chaitanya never stopped people from worshipping Lord Rama, for in many instances he even helped devotees of Lord Rama increase their level of attachment to the jewel of the Raghu dynasty. There are many who take Krishna to be an incarnation of Vishnu, for this is actually mentioned in many texts, including in portions of the Srimad Bhagavatam. In addition, probably the oldest book in the world is the Ramayana, which is a Vedic text which deals primarily with the life and pastimes of Lord Rama. In chronological terms, Rama and other incarnations of Vishnu appeared on earth prior to Krishna. While the Vedic evidence presented by devotees of Krishna is certainly flawless and completely accurate, the claims of Vishnu being the original and Krishna being an expansion can also be justified by referencing several incidents from Vedic history. For the Vishnu devotees, the circumstances surrounding Krishna's advent on earth described in the Srimad Bhagavatam point to the fact that Vishnu descended to earth as Krishna. Bhumi Devi, the presiding deity of the earth, was feeling a great burden, so she kindly approached Lord Brahma to help her. Brahma then went to visit Lord Vishnu and asked him to appear on earth. Lord Vishnu then kindly obliged and also arranged to have Ananta Shesha Naga, the eternal servant of Vishnu, come to earth in the form of Lord Balarama. Thus Vishnu and Ananta Shesha Naga appeared on earth as Krishna and Balarama. When Lord Krishna appeared from the womb of Mother Devaki in the prison cell of King Kamsa, he displayed his four-handed Vishnu form. This was to let his parents know that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead appearing as their son. At the time, simply showing his Krishna form wasn't enough to convey the idea of divinity. This actually points to another area of importance which we will discuss later on. When Krishna grew up to be an adult while ruling as a king in Dwaraka, he spent much time with his cousins the Pandavas. On one occasion, the Pandavas and Krishna met up with Markandeya Rishi, who was originally a great devotee of Lord Shiva, another powerful divine figure and devotee of Lord Vishnu. Markandeya Rishi explained to the Pandavas that during one particular kalp, he had the benefit of remaining alive during the destruction of the earth. After everything was destroyed, only one person remained, Lord Narayana in the form of a young boy. Inside Narayana's stomach, Markandeya saw the universal form consisting of all the universe's planets, stars and living entities. After finishing his description, Markandeya told the Pandavas that the same Narayana was sitting in front of them as Krishna. On the battlefield of Kurukshetra, just prior to one of the greatest wars in history, Krishna took to instructing the leading warrior of the Pandava side, Arjuna. In this discussion, which is chronicled in the famous Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna repeatedly refers to himself as God and as the divine entity. Yet Krishna at one point shows both the universal form and his four-armed form of Lord Narayana to Arjuna. Again, this speaks to the notion that followers of the Vedic tradition for thousands of years look to Lord Vishnu as the original personality of Godhead. Since Krishna is non-different from Vishnu, whether one takes him as the original in lieu of Vishnu is not really important. This fact is reinforced by the dealings of the other primary avatars of Lord Vishnu. Lord Rama is worshipped as the Supreme Personality of Godhead by millions, and during his time on earth, he too often referred to himself as God to his confidential associates. In the original Ramayana, the poem compiled by Maharshi Valmiki, Rama mentions that in a future yuga he will appear on earth as Govinda, which is another name for Krishna. In this way, we see that Rama is non-different from Krishna. Additionally, many sages desired to have intimate relations with Lord Rama, but since the Lord vowed to only have one wife, Sita Devi, he agreed to meet their requests in the future when he would come to earth as Lord Krishna. Similarly, there are devotees who worship other Vishnu forms, such as Lord Narasimhadeva. In fact, in the Narasimha Purana, Narasimhadeva is addressed as Adam, which means that he is the original personality of Godhead.
Lord Narasimhadeva is here, and he is also there on the opposite side. Wherever I go, there I see Lord Narasimhadeva. He is outside and within my heart. Therefore I take shelter of Lord Narasimhadeva, the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. Narasimha Purana.
So how do we reconcile these differences? Is Krishna the original or is Vishnu? Lord Krishna is certainly the original personality of Godhead simply based off the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and the statements of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Brahma Sanhita, Garga Sanhita and Brahmavavata Purana. Yet those who take Vishnu or any of his other non-different expansions as original are not wrong. This is because the differences of opinion only represent different angles of vision. The end result is still the same. If there is a difference at all between Krishna and Vishnu, it lies in the sweetness of appearance. Vishnu is viewed as more opulent and thus appealing to those who wish to worship the Lord in reverence. Krishna, on the other hand, is supremely attractive, so he generally appeals to those who wish to worship the Lord more intimately. God is everything, but everything is not God. This means that we can worship anything we want, but the results of such worship will vary. Only by worshipping non-different forms of the original form of Godhead, Vishnu Tattva, can we receive the benediction of eternal association with Supreme Spirit. Worship of any other entity or object will not secure such a reward. This means that only by worshipping Krishna, Vishnu, or another non-different form such as Rama, Narsimha, Chaitanya etc., can we be released from the cycle of birth and death. If a person takes Krishna as the original form and neglects Vishnu worship, their spiritual progress is not hindered. In the same way, devotees of Vishnu who neglect Krishna worship also aren't deficient in their spiritual practice. Let's think of it this way. Say we have a person who only reads the Ramayana and nothing else. They take Sri Rama to be the only form of Godhead and no one else. They dedicate themselves to performing devotional service, chanting the Lord's names, and viewing his deity form in the temple. Such a person will surely receive liberation in the afterlife and be spiritually fulfilled in every way. Devotees of Krishna sometimes say that Rama's name isn't as powerful as Krishna's, and that Sri Rama can only grant spiritual benedictions up to the point of impersonal liberation, while Lord Krishna can engage in loving association with the devotees in the mood of separation. While this sentiment surely is indicative of the great love and devotion of Krishna Bhaktas, there are a few examples which speak to Rama's complete abilities to provide any and all spiritual benedictions. Lord Hanuman, the celebrated divine figure of the Vedic tradition, personally offered his services to Rama during the Lord's time on earth. Hanuman actually doesn't see God in any other form except Rama. Moreover, Hanuman worships Rama completely in separation. Sita, Rama and Lakshmana love Hanuman so much that he could receive anything he asks for. Yet prior to Rama's return to the spiritual world, Hanuman only asked that he be allowed to remain alive on earth for as long as Rama's story was still being told. In this way, Hanuman is the perfect example of a devotee who worships the Lord through separation. Similarly, Goswami Tulsidas, a saint who took direct instruction from Sri Hanuman, also worshipped Rama in separation. Tulsidas often pointed to the devotion practiced by the chatak bird towards its beloved rain cloud as being the ideal example of how one should go about loving and serving God. Krishna's closest associates, including his foster parents, had no clue that he was the original form of Godhead. At best, they thought that maybe he was a demigod appearing in human form. Yet their devotion to him was fruitful nonetheless. This proves that one doesn't necessarily have to know all about the different incarnations and expansions to achieve perfection in consciousness. There is no difference between Krishna's body and spirit, so if we are attached to him in thoughts, words and deeds, even if we don't know that he's God, the benefit will still be the same. The issue of importance is that we worship and devote ourselves to Krishna Vishnu or a non-different expansion. Whether we view Krishna as the original or Vishnu doesn't matter at the end of the day. The ultimate objective is to be God-conscious at the time of death. The residents of Ayodhya all returned to the spiritual world with Lord Rama, for they would follow him to the ends of the earth. They weren't concerned with whether or not he was God, they simply loved him with all their hearts. If we exhibit the same level of devotion to our specific authorized divine object of worship, we too will reap the same reward. Chapter 5, Comings and Goings.
Question. There are several prevailing opinions regarding Krishna's departure from the material world. Can you shed light on the issue?
Answer. Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, periodically appears and disappears on this earth. This isn't to say that he is a magician performing illusory acts to entertain the individual souls, but rather, he is never capable of taking birth or dying. The same actually holds true with the individual spirit souls as well, as the concepts of birth and death are created from the conditioned angle of vision. When one's mindset is purified, i.e., when they regain their natural consciousness, they see things as they are instead of as they are not. In the conditioned state, the individual is clouded by ignorance born of the illusory energy known as Maya. We have no control over the circumstances of our birth, yet we somehow lament over death. If we're going to feel sad, why not lament over birth, something just as uncontrollable as our death? Krishna's appearances on earth, both in the personal form and those of his various avatars, are certainly well celebrated and marveled over. Yet the same is not true for his disappearances, his subsequent departures to the spiritual world. Sri Krishna's return to the spiritual world is especially a topic of controversy, for the non-devotees and gross materialists love to use this event as proof that Krishna is not a divine figure and certainly not the original form of Godhead. From basic analysis of the descriptions of this event, we can see that the Lord's ascension to the spiritual sky certainly wasn't anything out of the ordinary for him, nor was it an indication of any sign of fallibility. Rather, Krishna's ascension to the spiritual sky was just another sign of his causeless mercy shown towards every living entity. God is one. He cannot be the exclusive property of any set of individuals. The concept of a Supreme Lord implies that no one can be above him. Since it is impossible for anyone to successfully challenge the Lord's supremacy, it means that God is the fountainhead, the original source of everything. Therefore, all forms of life, regardless of their outward dress, can trace their lineage back to the original divine being. In the Vedic tradition, details pertaining to the Lord's appearances, activities, and transcendental forms are provided. Since there are innumerable forms, there is often confusion as to which is the original and which isn't. The sacred and flawless Vedic texts declare the fountainhead to be an entity who has a transcendental, eternal, and blissful body. Since this entity is all-attractive, he is known as Krishna, whose immediate expansion or other non-different form of Lord Narayana is also often taken as the original. Even the Ramayana, the epic poem detailing the transcendental activities of Lord Rama, doesn't contradict this fact. Rama is no different from Narayana, so the ultimate conclusion of who is the original form of Godhead remains the same. Since there is no difference between Narayana and Krishna, we can use the two names interchangeably and thus consider the two forms to be the same. Around 5,000 years ago, Narayana came to earth as Krishna. This is the information given to us by the Srimad Bhagavatam and Mahabharata. In other texts, Krishna is taken as the original form who personally descended to earth. In either case, the original Lord of mankind made a divine appearance for the sake of annihilating miscreants and pleasing the purified souls, the devotees who have no other business than serving the supreme lovable object in thoughts, words, and deeds at all times. Krishna's visible form was first seen in the town of Mathura. Immediately after appearing from the womb of Mother Devaki, the Lord was transferred to the neighboring town of Vrindavana, where he grew up as a child and tended to cows. In his adult years, Krishna returned to Mathura and then subsequently formed his own kingdom of Dwaraka. The most notable incident of Krishna's adult life was his role in the Bharat War, a massive fight that saw the death of millions of valiant soldiers. Not surprisingly, the side that Krishna was on, the Pandavas, won. Devotees usually discuss and relish the pastimes performed by Krishna in Vrindavana. From his adult years, the famous discourse given on the battlefield to Arjuna, the lead Pandava warrior, is similarly a topic of great interest. This sublime set of instructions, which was personally delivered by Krishna, forms the basis of the illustrious Bhagavad Gita, the most concise and complete exposition on Vedic philosophy. While devotees focus on Krishna's activities and his teachings, the non-devotees and atheists like to discuss the Lord's activities that made him appear to be human. After all, Krishna did roam this earth in the guise of an ordinary living entity, so naturally he would perform some activities that didn't seem to be of the divine nature. The key point to understand is that these activities gave the appearance of fallibility. The Supreme Lord is Akyuta, which means one who is infallible. Fallibility is the quality of the conditioned soul who lives under the dictates of nature. God is the creator of nature, so he is incapable of being controlled by it. These facts are difficult to understand for the gross materialists. They live strictly off true and false concepts, wherein all conclusions are derived off of personal experience. Since the scientific community has never seen a person appear out of the womb of a mother without the prior act of conception, They take the descriptions of Krishna's appearance found in the Srimad Bhagavatam to be mythology, some ordinary event which was later hyped up into something it wasn't. To substantiate their claims, the atheists will point to Krishna's activities with the young cowherd girls of Vrindavana, and his ultimate disappearance from the earth, which saw him being shot in the foot by a hunter named Jara. So are the atheists correct in their assessment? If not, why then would Krishna give this appearance of fallibility? The answer is that every individual soul has independence and free will. This is not something given to us by God but rather something we always possess. Just as God is the supreme controller who never assumed that title, as individual sparks emanating from the original spiritual fire, we naturally inherit the quality of freedom. The difference between God and ourselves is that the activities we can take up based off our freedom are limited. The root cause of the material creation is the misuse of the free will property. The individual spirit souls, desiring to imitate their lovable master, were given a temporary and miserable playing field. This field is temporary because it has to be created. Since it manifests at the will of the hand of Supreme Spirit, it most certainly must be destroyed at some point as well. Since there is both creation and destruction, the end result of any activity performed on such a turf is misery. If the material world is so miserable, why would Krishna create it? The desires of the individual souls are never denied. The wished for objects of sense gratification may not always come to fruition, but the desires themselves are not thwarted. Since the individual souls wish to remain apart from Krishna, they are allowed to remain in the material world perpetually. When the Lord makes his divine appearances on earth, his aim is to take back those souls looking for liberation, the Jivatmas who have had enough of the pretend life. Krishna is kind enough to enact his sweet pastimes for the satisfaction of such purified souls. By relishing these transcendental activities, one's consciousness gradually becomes purified to the point where the ultimate enjoyer is seen as Krishna instead of the gross senses. When this purified mindset is maintained up until the time of death, release from the cycle of birth and death is granted. Even with all of this information available to them, knowledge which mind you costs nothing to acquire, the majority of the conditioned souls will not take to Krishna consciousness. Rather, they remain steadfast in their challenge to the Lord's authority. Obviously, such an effort will be futile, for every conditioned soul is a slave to the forces of nature. Mother Nature's most powerful agent is all-devouring death, which appears on the scene through the agent of change known as time. No conditioned entity is immune from the effects of time, thus the pursuit to surpass God in strength, stature, and level of enjoyment will eventually fail. A gross materialist, an asura or non-devotee will have trouble convincing others and even themselves of the supremacy of their way of life, dedicated to sense gratification. The truths found in the Vedas are quite logical and profound, so anyone who honestly and sincerely hears them from the right sources will be firmly convinced of the supremacy of the engagement of bhakti yoga or devotional service. The quintessential act of bhakti is the chanting of the names of God, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. The non-devotees not wanting to chant or take part in any activity of bhakti hold steadfast to karma. To support their ingrained attitude, they will look for any piece of information that debunks the notion that Krishna is God. Though the classic Vedic texts such as the Ramayana, Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam are filled with hundreds of thousands of profound verses, the asuras will scour these pages for one tiny little quote or incident that, when taken out of context, can allay their fears of God's existence and supremacy. This behavior is indeed sad but true, as the atheists are afraid that Krishna might actually be God, for if that were the case, it would mean that the sinful way of life is the wrong one. Due to his kind mercy, the Supreme Lord gives the asuras all the evidence they need. The Lord first exhibits qualities of strength which are impossible for an ordinary person to believe. Not only does he appear on this earth without the act of conception, but he kills powerful demons and lifts gigantic hills with just one finger. Since the asuras can't imagine a tiny child performing such wondrous feats, they take Krishna to be a myth. Then there are some non-devotees who accept the idea of Krishna's appearance, but who still don't want to devote their lives to him. They will look to Krishna's intimate activities with the gopis of Vrindavana as evidence of Krishna's fallibility. How can God dance around with young girls? This is who we are supposed to worship? Of course, thought is never given as to why God should forbid himself from dancing with young girls. The Supreme Lord is self-satisfied, and he is the object of dharma or religiosity. Piety and virtue only exist to help the individual understand Krishna. The Lord has no need to abide by these rules which are intended for the conditioned souls, those whose flawed desire in life is to challenge God. In addition, the interaction with the gopis actually proves Krishna's divine nature. As the Supreme Lord, he will grant whatever anyone wants, provided that their hearts are pure and their motives properly situated. The gopis are the greatest lovers of the Supreme Spirit, so if they desire to dance with Krishna, the Lord will most certainly accede to their request. There is yet another class of asuras who accepts Krishna's appearance and his activities with the gopis, but still doesn't take him to be God. They will point to his disappearance, an incident where the Lord was shot in the foot by a hunter. Never mind the fact that the Mahabharata explicitly states that Krishna was willingly ready to return to the spiritual world, and that he knew what was going to happen. The asuras will ignore any evidence that goes against their central religious belief, the notion of Krishna being fallible. These are all the workings of Krishna's divine energy known as Maya, an illusory force which clouds the intelligence of the conditioned souls who desire to remain in the material world. The workings of Maya prove that the Lord is the most munificent of all devas or gods. The question may be raised as to why Krishna would leave the earth in such a manner, especially since it runs the risk of deluding the minds of the pure-hearted devotees. The answer is that even devotees sometimes fall victim to the influences of power, greed, resentment and anger. But since they are pure at heart, the Lord doesn't hold such actions against them. Rather, he takes the necessary steps to ensure that the powers they believe they possess remain intact. As an example, Narada Muni, the great saint and devotee of Narayana, once cursed the Lord to take birth on earth and become separated from his beloved wife. Narada had prayed to Vishnu to allow a beautiful princess to choose him for marriage. Narada is a sannyasi, so he has no business intimately associating with women. Bhagavan always protects his devotees, so he most certainly wasn't going to allow Narada to fall down from his exalted position. Therefore the Lord, in a very slick way, appeared to grant Narada's request, but in reality didn't. When the princess chose another man for marriage, Narada realized that it was Vishnu's fault and then subsequently cursed him. Of course, God can never be cursed. No one is capable of telling him what to do. But the Lord, as a great father is apt to do, plays along since the person doing the cursing doesn't know any better. It is similar to how a parent will make wagers with their children while playing certain games. If the parent loses, they agree to the terms of the wager, even though the young child has no say-so in the matter. The adult remains superior regardless of whatever action is taken. Since Narada is so kind and pure, Vishnu decided to wholeheartedly abide by his curse. Vishnu agreed to appear on earth as Lord Rama, the beloved prince of Ayodhya. He would most certainly be separated from his innocent wife Sita for an extended period of time, but the goals set out prior to his appearance were still met. When Krishna roamed the earth, similar behavior towards the Lord was exhibited by other exalted figures. When Krishna was residing in Dwaraka, his chief queen was Rukmini Devi. The divine couple was once visited by the Brahmana Durvasa Muni. The Brahmanas or priestly class are loved by Krishna very much. In the Vedic tradition, a guest is to be received very hospitably, especially if he is a Brahmana. Durvasa decided to test Krishna's level of dedication to the Brahmanas and the etiquette of hospitality by making one outrageous request after another during his visit. Yet every outlandish request he made was met by both Rukmini and Krishna. One of the requests involved spreading fermenti or pyasa paste all over their bodies. Krishna and Rukmini agreed to do this, but the Lord neglected to spread the paste on the sole of one of his feet. Durvasa, after admitting that he was just testing the couple, granted them the boon that whichever part of the body they spread the paste on would be immune from the attacks of others. Noticing that Krishna had missed the spot on the sole of his foot, Durvasa remarked that he was disappointed in Krishna. After the Pandavas won the bloody Bharat war, the mother of the leading fighters for the defeated party, Gandhari, began to bewail her plight. Saddened by the death of her 100 sons, she immediately blamed Krishna. As a result of her anger, she cursed the Lord and his Vrishni dynasty to be destroyed after 36 years. The Lord, instead of yelling at her or laughing at her gall in imprecating this curse, kindly accepted it. He told Gandhari that he was looking for an excuse to leave this earth and put an end to the Vrishnis, and that the curse had now given him one. Sure enough, when the time came, all the Vrishnis would be destroyed due to a terrible internal quarrel. Krishna and his brother Balarama left the scene and retired to the forest. Balarama, after entering a deep meditational trance, assumed his form of Ananta Shesha Naga and returned to the spiritual sky. Krishna similarly laid down for meditation after remembering the words of Durvasa and Gandhari. At this time, a hunter named Jara came and accidentally shot Krishna in the foot. Touching the Lord's feet, the hunter felt remorseful. Immediately after this, Krishna ascended to the spiritual world, where he was greeted by all his divine associates. The Mahabharata really doesn't leave much room for doubt as it pertains to Krishna's return to the spiritual world. Nowhere does it say that the Lord was taken by surprise or that he died like an ordinary man. He returned to the spiritual world in his transcendental body, the way that he always returns after appearing in the material world. As mentioned before, the controversy is only from the side of the Asuras and gross materialists. But this disagreement will always be there. Even during Krishna's time, there were many demons who refused to acknowledge his supremacy. Enemies such as Shishupala would make fun of the Lord for associating with the cowherd community during his childhood. These enemies thought Krishna was not fit to be a king, for it was beneath the royal order to engage in agriculture. The Shishupalas of the world will always be around, for that is the root cause of this material existence. For the devotees, Krishna's appearances and disappearances are easy to understand. Armed with this proper understanding, the purified souls liberate themselves from the cycle of birth and death. Chapter 6: A False Choice.
Question: how do I find the right balance between material life and spiritual life?
Answer: picking up the random book on Hinduism or Dharma, the items discussed within typically cover the illusory aspect of this world and how pains and pleasures always come and go. The wise can block out these unwanted extremes by steady practice of meditational yoga, systematic worship of a divine figure, or through fruitive work with the results sacrificed to a higher cause. Presented with this introduction, those contemplating a dive into spiritual life may start to worry that a too rapid an elimination of pains, pleasures and highs and lows will result in the basic obligations of family life not being met. But for one who follows the bhakti process, the religion of love and the pinnacle of all spiritual practice, there is no question of too much renunciation or giving up necessary activities. Indeed, even Lord Krishna, who is himself the beneficiary of bhakti, declares that every soul has a penchant for work, so repression itself cannot accomplish anything. For those following the highest form of spirituality, every second of every day is spent engaged in the Lord's service, as the mind works under the control of the purified consciousness. This is not a hostile takeover by any means, as the mind assumes its true value when focused on the proper object, that entity who is capable of bringing about the highest bliss. The fears pertaining to a disturbance in family life are certainly well-founded. After all, if as a family man, I were to play sports every night or go out to bars and nightclubs, surely the quality of life at home with the family would suffer. Not only would there be financial loss from the money spent on outside endeavors, but there would also be less time spent with the spouse and kids. Activities under the umbrella of spirituality have the aura of being even more dangerous towards strong attachments, as one who understands that they are spirit soul and not their body may decide to forego every responsibility in life altogether. The renounced order in the Varnashrama Dharma system, the prescribed divisions of society and life stages put forward by the Vedas, the ancient scriptures of India, is known as sannyasa. Since time immemorial, it has been every parent's great fear that their child would renounce the world at a young age and take to the life of a mendicant, wherein they would voluntarily restrict themselves from having any association with money, women, or fruitive activity. Lord Chaitanya, a divine preacher and spiritual master appearing in India some 500 years ago, had to deal with similar issues with his parents. Sri Gauranga's older brother Vishwarupa had taken sannyasa at a young age, so the parents were afraid that their beloved Nimai would soon follow suit. As a precautionary measure, they even took Lord Chaitanya out of school for a few years, fearing that if he became too wise, he would see the futility in worldly life and the benefit to renouncing every aspect of family. Despite their best efforts, their son would eventually take sannyasa at the age of 24, but he would make the best use of renunciation by actively changing the world for the better through the introduction of the Sankirtana movement. Though the fears of the parents are quite understandable, they are not justified in the case of those students taking to the Bhakti school, especially as it relates to the worries of the children maintaining their livelihoods and level of enjoyment. The tradition commonly known as Hinduism is understood to be the path of spirituality, having several different options for success. The paths are described by the different terms of yoga, jnana, karma, hatha and bhakti. The uninformed belief is that one can just choose any of these paths and practice them perfectly to become self-realized. But this viewpoint is not accurate in the least bit. It is humorous to see reviews made of the poems written by Goswami Tulsidas, a dear devotee of Lord Rama and Sri Hanuman, with the commentators declaring that all the different paths of Hinduism are equally as beneficial, and that Tulsidas just happened to choose bhakti as his preferred method of worship. This fact couldn't be further from the truth. All other forms of yoga, though legitimate in their own right, can only lead up to bhakti, whereas bhakti automatically brings the results of all the other systems combined. To understand the distinctions, familiarity with the properties of the soul is required. In schools of thought not tied to bhakti, the entire external world is taken to be Maya, which can mean false. Maya is that which is not, so when applied to the phenomenal world, it references the fact that everything that is visually perceptible and any knowledge that is acquired through the senses must be considered the opposite of truth. The supreme absolute truth is the more accurate description for God as it speaks to his infallible nature and indisputable fixed position. But in reality, Maya is not false, only temporary. It may be a matter of semantics, but we can think of the workings of nature in terms of the effects of a dream. During the dreaming state, we imagine ourselves in various situations, some pleasant and some not so nice. Surely the situations and our behavior enacted during these dreams are fake, as they have no reality whatsoever. Yet the pains and pleasure felt are real, as we can wake up in a cold sweat and have our heart rates rapidly increase. Since the world around us is constantly changing, the outside settings can be compared to a dream. Yet the pains and pleasures are real, as are the manifestations. They come into creation, exist for some time, and then eventually get destroyed. Since the material elements, which exist eternally due to their inherent link to the Supreme Lord as His external energy, are temporarily manifest before us, they don't need to be rejected outright. When the objects of this world are used to further cloud the intelligence of the pure soul into thinking that he is the ultimate enjoyer and original proprietor, then surely the effects of Maya are in full force. God is God, his position never changes. Not only did he create everything, but he is the only entity that enjoys to the fullest degree. Since God is every single life form's best friend, his enjoyment automatically leads to the pleasure of his associates, those who are intimately linked with him in consciousness. Those engaged strictly in fruitive activity take the objects of the world and use them for their personal betterment. But there is actually no benefit at all, for as long as there is intimate association with Maya, the soul cannot return to the spiritual world, its natural home. At the core, the soul is a lover of God. Based on this predominant characteristic, there is only one constitutional activity, divine love or bhakti. The terms bhakti and yoga are merely products of the phenomenal world, as identifiers are required to distinguish constitutional activities from conditioned ones. In the spiritual world, everyone is a lover of God, whose original form is that of the all-pleasing and all-attractive Lord Krishna. Krishna is the supreme being for everyone and not simply a sectarian figure. Devotion to him is ingrained in the soul's makeup. Divine love does not need to be followed through blind sentiment or unjustified faith. Rather, by understanding the makeup of the soul, the supremacy of bhakti can be easily acknowledged. Yet bhakti is so powerful that anyone who takes to it even half-heartedly will gradually acquire all the knowledge they need. Simply by chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, the soul deluded into a false ownership mentality by the effects of Maya will slowly but surely realize its constitutional position as servant of the Lord. Service to Krishna, when practiced properly, follows Sharanagati or complete surrender. It was this Sharanagati that Tulsidas firmly believed in. The pure Bhakt or devotee doesn't even know what the term bhakti is or how to describe it. There is no accurate way to compare divine love to any activity of the mundane world, but the closest match may be the behavior of the devoted mother towards her child. A good mother loves her child throughout his or her life, irrespective of the outward changes. Even if the child is in his or her 30s, the mother will still view them as a tiny infant. This is actually an advanced vision, one which comes close to accurately identifying the properties of the soul as being unchanging. Whether in the body of a child or an adult, the makeup of individual spirit never changes. Reincarnation is merely the complete changing of bodies, the discarding of one set of clothes in favor of a new one. The good mother, wanting only to please and protect her child, will take whatever steps are necessary to be an effective parent. She is not conscious at all about the skills required for parenting or the rules and regulations. Her pure love guides all her activities. In this heightened mood of service, there is tremendous bliss derived from simply having a legitimate object of worship. Moreover, there is little or no tangible return sought, as a good mother is one who can raise a child that eventually no longer requires her aid. Thus, parenting proves to be the most thankless of tasks, yet one that is accepted with enthusiasm and excitement nonetheless. Tulsidas and other Vaishnavas on the highest platform of worship take to serving Krishna, or one of his non-different expansions, with full heart and soul, not expecting anything in return. Tulsidas compared his devotion to Lord Rama to the Chatak bird's dedication to viewing the dark rain cloud in the sky. The analogy is apt because the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his original form and Vishnu expansions has a dark blue color, almost identical to that of a cloud that is about to pour down rain. Tulsidas asserts that not only does he exclusively view this cloud all day, but he never even expects any gifts in return. It may rain or it may not, but the Chatak's dedication knows no bounds. Since the Chatak overlooks any and all defects that may be perceptible in the cloud, the bird's love cannot be measured to any accurate degree, as there is no limit to the loving affection. The dedication of the Chatak best illustrates the bhakti spirit, a penchant to love found within the soul. In the phenomenal world, the loving propensity gets misdirected, hence all sorts of undesirable issues result. Objects of Maya are externally related to Krishna, so they are not able to provide any tangible pleasure to the worshipper. If Maya is part of Krishna's energy, why would it have such a deluding effect? The answer is that the souls who wanted to leave Krishna's association and pretend to behave as God were allowed to do so. Since there is only one supreme controller, no amount of imitation can prove worthwhile. Yet due to the causeless mercy of the Supreme, the delusion is continuously supported through the effects of Maya. Another question may be raised as to why Krishna would knowingly allow any of us to be tricked by an illusory energy. The answer is that if God is the Supreme Personality in all the worlds, his powers and the behavior directed towards him must be of all varieties. The soul as part and parcel of Krishna is also independent, eternal, knowledgeable and blissful. In order for free will and independence to have validity, their potential exercises must travel in both directions, in favor of Krishna and against him. If there was only favoritism towards Krishna, there would be no truth to the fact that the individual souls have free will. The soul's abilities are much smaller in comparison to God's, but this discrepancy doesn't mean that individual spiritual sparks are not free to act out their propensities. Just as the good mother will automatically learn how to hold her young child, change its clothes and feed it properly, one who is completely immersed in bhakti will automatically acquire the knowledge necessary to keep the internal fire of devotion lit at all times. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder of the modern-day Hare Krishna movement, embodied this principle. During his time on earth, Srila Prabhupada, whose only business in life was to serve Krishna and spread his glories to others, took on the roles of parent, spiritual master, teacher, businessman, cook, writer, lecturer, translator, artist, musician, accountant, and so many other important posts. He was highly skilled in each of these endeavors, though he had no attachment to any of them. Indeed, he didn't even make a separate effort to acquire above-average abilities in any of these fields. Since his predominant desire was to serve Krishna, the Lord who has the ability in man Parusham, ensured that Prabhupada had all the skills and knowledge necessary to carry out his service. Other types of yoga do not bear such properties. One may take to fruitive activity and purify themselves by giving up the results to worthwhile causes, but this doesn't automatically lead to the highest platform of pure bhakti. Renunciation of results surely can help the sincere soul elevate to the transcendental plane of consciousness, but success is not guaranteed. Similarly, through the yoga system that leads to the acquisition of theoretical knowledge of the nature of this world and the properties of spirit, one can ascend to a higher level of thought. Yet familiarity with esoteric information is not enough. There must be constant activity for the soul. One may have a medical degree from a respected university, but unless they are regularly practicing and treating patients, their knowledge essentially goes to waste. A general has no special status unless he has a mission to command. Similarly, the knowledge the soul is naturally beaming with must have a target to shine on in order for the intelligence to be worthwhile. In the absence of a steady engagement, no perfection in life, be it material opulence, the mastery of a mystic ability, or knowledge of the Absolute, can provide any tangible benefit, at least as it pertains to the current lifetime. One who is pious and well positioned by the time of death certainly gets to continue their efforts in the next life, but bhakti provides benefits immediately. The issue of finding a balance between material and spiritual life presents a false choice because only one who is not practicing bhakti thinks along these lines. The initial concern is understandable for those who aren't familiar with the practices of the ancient art of the religion of love, but those who are sincere servants of Krishna firmly understand that in the realm of bhakti, every minute of every day brings another opportunity to please the Supreme Lord. The dry renunciates may reject the world as false, and the fruitive workers may accept everything for their own enjoyment. But the bhakta uses everything at their disposal to ensure that the intoxicating smile on the sweet face of Shyamasundara never vanishes. The differences in viewpoint pertaining to material nature are nicely illustrated in the behaviors resulting from the purchase or receipt of a laptop computer or other high-end device. The impersonalist mental speculator, one who is studying the esoteric information pertaining to body, mind, soul and matter, will look at the laptop as an object of maya, something that will lead to false enjoyment and misery. Thus the object must be shunned outright. The fruitive worker, taking the objects of the world to be the source of ultimate enjoyment, will eagerly get to work on the laptop and use it for activities such as chatting with friends, watching movies, and maybe even scouring internet sites for pornography. Without leading to a higher shift in consciousness, none of these activities bring any tangible benefit, and they surely can cause the further clouding of the natural intelligence possessed by the individual. The Bhakt, however, will see the laptop as an opportunity to serve Krishna. I can connect this to the internet and talk about Krishna with millions of people. I can view pictures of the Lord, download lectures about him, and learn how to cook food for him that later turns into prasadam. In this way, the laptop and its components take on their true value. The matter that went into the computer's construction belongs to Krishna's external energy. These elements can only be considered Maya as long as they are inhibiting towards one's drive to perfection in consciousness. If the objects of this world are used to further the cause of bhakti pleasing Krishna, there is no question of Maya or illusion. The proper use of the laptop is one example, but there are many more that illustrate the bhakti mindset. Indeed, the most pure bhaktas, those entities we are advised to model our behavior after, were themselves firmly ensconced in material life, or at least they appeared to be so to the outside observer. These grand yogis, the gopis of Vrindavana, were family women, but because of their pure love for Krishna, they were not entangled in any work. There was no question of balancing spiritual life with material life, as their entire consciousness was steadily focused on Krishna's sweet, transcendental form and the beautiful sounds that emanated from his flute. From the worldly perspective, the gopis were mothers and cowherd girls. In modern terms, they could be considered the first working women. Though they were dependent on their husbands for protection, they were completely independent in their dealings. Freedom doesn't mean foregoing responsibilities and the proper standards of conduct. Rather, independence is a frame of mind, one where the consciousness is not inhibited by external demands. The gopis, exercising their free will, chose to adhere to their family duties at all times, while remaining ever fixed on the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who had been kind enough to live in their town of Vrindavana for many years. The gopis' daily chores consisted of tending to children, taking care of cows, churning butter, going to the neighboring town of Mathura to sell yogurt, butter and cream, and taking care of the household, which included seeing to the satisfaction of their husbands. They were working all day and night, tirelessly and without any direct compensation. From the perspective of one who is not well versed in bhakti, it would appear that the gopis were 100% engaged in material life. Save for the few visits to local temples and the service offered to the Brahmanas, the gopis had no hint of spirituality in their lives. But in fact, just the opposite situation was present. The gopis had not a hint of material contamination, they were always thinking of Krishna. They are deemed the greatest lovers of God, as they are always attempting to elevate others to the platform of Krishna consciousness through their recommendations made to Krishna. The gopi in whom the qualities of bhakti are found at the highest levels is Srimati Radharani, Krishna's eternal consort. She is so kind that if she sees us taking to bhakti sincerely, she will recommend to Krishna that a new candidate for receiving his favor has emerged. Such kindness cannot be found anywhere in this world, as it is the exclusive property of Radha, Krishna and those liberated souls who always aim to please them. Bhakti is not simply a method of self-realization, it is religion. All other rules, regulations, codes of dharma, dresses, fasting days etc. are all meant to lead to elevation to the platform of bhakti. In this day and age, it is better to take to devotional service right away, even if it is not practiced at the most advanced level in the beginning. By regularly chanting Hare Krishna and associating with devotees, the spiritual consciousness will gradually be awakened. In bhakti, there is no question of balance, as the highest level of intelligence is found very quickly. Family life and concerns for one's friends and neighbors are automatically taken care of, as the ultimate objective becomes the service of the Lord. The bhakta accepts everything that is favorable towards the purification of consciousness and rejects anything that is unfavorable. The lifestyle of Krishna consciousness is open to any person, of any age and at any stage in their life. It is not true that liberation or the release from the cycle of birth and death can only be granted to sannyasis, those in the renounced order. Krishna's mercy is available to everyone, but we must make the choice to accept it. Since the spiritual consciousness only brings tangible benefits, there is no reason to not at least take the first steps by chanting the Lord's names. Even if there is a perceived fear of imbalance between material and spiritual life, one should at least include some spirituality in their daily affairs. Something as simple as chanting Hare Krishna 16 rounds a day on a set of japa beads is enough to form a minimum regimen. The rest of the day can be spent in material life, though by following this chanting routine along with abstention from meat-eating, gambling, intoxication, and illicit sex life, the individual will slowly but surely realize that Krishna is in everything and that every minute of every day, irrespective of the engagement one is immersed in, can bring tremendous bliss through tapping into the purified consciousness. Chapter 7: A Sight for Sore Eyes.
Question: Is worship of idols prohibited in the Vedas?
Answer: The concept of worshipping a deity as a means of achieving salvation for the soul is certainly a unique and often misunderstood aspect of the most prominent spiritual tradition of India, the Vedas. As the ancient law codes provided by the Supreme Lord Himself, the Vedas provide many roadmaps towards ultimate success with a commonality shared amongst all the different processes. Turning one's back on material life to attain spiritual enlightenment and the sublime life that follows requires a shift in consciousness. The gross elements that surround a soul at any given time will ultimately be discarded, but consciousness carries from one body to another. One whose mind is completely fixed on the personality of Godhead at the time of death will immediately go to the transcendental realm and never have to deal with material nature again. Indeed, whatever consciousness we have while quitting the body acts as the determinant of our future fortunes. As such, the process of deity worship, wherein a statue or picture representation of the Supreme Lord's transcendental features is erected, observed, honored, and adored, proves to be extremely beneficial. There we say that any spiritual tradition that lacks this potent weapon capable of attacking the negative influences of material nature will be substandard in its effectiveness. The deity is the visible manifestation of the Lord's ever-available benevolence and mercy. During His many visits to this world, the Lord Himself not only practiced deity worship, but He also recommended it to others. Anyone who says otherwise and tries to use the Vedas as the authority for their misinformed statements should be understood to be the greatest fool and cheater. Let's first review the logical basis for worshipping a deity. Indeed, it is the emphatic dogmatic insistence of many followers around the world that the outward offering of obeisances to anyone, including a statue representation of the absolute truth, should be avoided at all costs. But at the same time, the central component of any religious practice is worship. Who could argue this fact? Allegiance to political leaders, actors, actresses, sports figures, and even family members is held strong through keeping pictures and posters within the home. The wallpaper on the computer desktop provides an indication of who or what the owner of the device assigns top priority status to in their mind. Any dedicated attention given to another entity is a form of worship. The nexus of the different varieties of worship is consciousness, the thoughts of the mind. We can say that we worship a certain individual, but if we never think about them in any way, the professions are just empty words. For instance, if we say that we are a fan of a particular athlete and we never watch them play or even follow their ups and downs, to what value is our allegiance? Support must involve some type of worship which starts with contemplation. At least according to those who are spiritually inclined, God is supposed to be that one person we should always think about no matter what. Visiting church once a week or praying a few times a day are certainly wonderful habits, but the point of emphasis is still on the altering of consciousness. To this end, how can the benefits of deity worship ever be denied? The Supreme Lord has a transcendental form, otherwise He would be inferior to the living entities occupying the phenomenal world. With that form comes a penchant for activity, a desire to perform pastimes. Denying the sportive tendencies of the Supreme Lord is another foolish tactic employed by those who have no understanding of the blissful aspect of truth. Every living entity is seeking ananda or bliss, and this desire is derived from the eternal bliss that is found in full in the personality of Godhead, who, not surprisingly, is addressed as Krishna in His original form. Only God can be the most attractive person who is never disturbed under any circumstance. Since there is no benefit to worshipping a mentally concocted form representing the truth, we must hear of the Lord's features from authority figures, those whose spiritual lineage descends from Krishna. Just as any accompanying branch or twig is ultimately connected to the original tree, the bona fide spiritual teachers have some sort of link to the original person. As such, they can present to us tangible information of what the Lord looks like, what behaviors he takes to, and what pleases him. Indeed, from authorized teachings we also find out that Krishna is not God's only form, as he kindly expands into multitudes of non-different personalities which are equally as worthy of worship and similarly appealing to those looking for a higher taste in their activities. When the deity representations are crafted off of authorized explanations, and if they match one of the non-different expansions of the absolute truth, then surely worship of them would be beneficial. Any other type of idolatry is equivalent to the worship of any ordinary figure, so such practices are not only unauthorized, but they also lead to inferior results. Since spirit is the opposite of matter, which is the temporary manifestation of a separated energy emerging from the original energetic, worship of Supreme Spirit is completely different than any other display of reverence. When the desires of the individual are to feed the hungry senses, which are always starving for attention, the mind gets deluded into giving entities not on an equal footing with the Supreme Lord top priority. Attention is not only paid to ordinary human beings, but also to some elevated personalities who are known as demigods. Deity representations of the divine heavenly figures can also be crafted, honored and worshipped, but the results only lead to a continuation of material life. It is said in the Bhagavad Gita, the song of God spoken by Krishna himself, that worshippers of the Devas or demigods go to the planets of the Devas, while devotees of Krishna go to the eternal land in the spiritual sky. Even the home of the demigods goes through cycles of creation and destruction, so nothing permanent is achieved by worshipping an inhabitant of the heavenly realm. Not all gods are the same, as no embodied being, one that is forced to accept a temporary material body, even one that remains in its form for millions of years, can be considered equal to the Supreme Personality. As a medium of communication, words can transfer information and also bring great pleasure. When read on a page, words that describe some appealing subject matter bring joy and bliss to the reader. Sound vibrations have a similar stimulating effect, as a pleasant song can alter the mood within the mind and bring the attentive listener back to a previous time. Pictures also can evoke pleasurable feelings and allow for extended contemplation on a particular person or subject. If all such aspects of the material creation can have beneficial effects, how can we not derive tremendous transcendental satisfaction from worshipping a deity? Why would the Lord deny us that benefit, especially knowing that we are already prone to worshipping man and the demigods? The claims made against the validity of deity worship don't pass the smell test in any way. Matter is considered Maya, or that which is not personally God, only for as long as it is not used to purify consciousness. God is the creator of matter, so why should he prohibit us from utilizing material elements to gain an understanding of the pastimes that continue uninterrupted in the spiritual world? It is one thing for the uninformed outsider to rail against the deity worship tradition of the Vedas, but it is even more appalling and humorous at the same time to see deity worship attacked by those who cite the Vedas as the authority for their skewed viewpoint. The Vedas are originally a collection of songs that praise the absolute truth. Any book or poem that reaches the same conclusion as the original Vedas, that of Krishna being the only object worthy of worship and undivided affection, is considered Vedic literature. The Vedas are non-different from Krishna since they sing his names and describe his glories. As such, whatever Vedic texts say and whatever Krishna speaks personally are completely in accord with each other. To say that the Vedas prohibit deity worship is to say that the original law codes for mankind deny the validity of worshipping Krishna, a claim which, by definition, is a contradiction. The Vedas are Krishna, so they can never speak anything against any practice which aims to further one's Krishna consciousness. The worst offenders are those who dare to claim that Krishna himself prohibits deity worship through his teachings. This is an even more foolish viewpoint because it is well known that Sri Krishna appeared on earth during the Dwapara Yuga, a time period that saw a preponderance of temple worship. During that time there were many grand temples across the world which held regular worship of Lord Vishnu, who is Krishna's four-handed expansion, in charge of the majority of the aspects of creation. Krishna himself worshipped deities, so what sane man will say that the Lord prohibits such behavior? These erroneous viewpoints come about through a narrow study of Vedic literature, which focuses on versions of the Bhagavad Gita that are translated and commented on by someone who is not a devotee of the Lord. The Bhagavad Gita is one small chapter in an enormously large work known as the Mahabharata. Nevertheless, we can't just pick up the Mahabharata and understand all the underlying purports and deep meanings behind the different accounts of historical incidents contained within. Such information has to be learned from someone who has dedicated their life to serving the Lord and understanding Him. In addition to the instructions he provided on the battlefield of Kurukshetra to Arjuna, just prior to his return to the spiritual world, Krishna imparted Vedic wisdom to his dear friend Uddhava. In this talk, which is found in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam and which is also known as the Uddhava Gita, an entire section is dedicated to deity worship and how it should be performed. One who only reads the Bhagavad Gita without following the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, an Akaya belonging to an unbroken line of spiritual teachers descending from Krishna, will not understand the different verses properly, no matter how many times they are read. Indeed, even the information presented by Krishna in the Uddhava Gita about deity worship is very basic and only touches on the essentials. The practice of visiting temples and worshipping the deity was commonly known to all sincere followers of Vedic traditions in the Dwapara Yuga, so these concepts didn't need to be expanded upon in great detail. In more recent times, the kind and merciful followers of Lord Chaitanya have very elaborately described what goes into deity worship and how to perform it properly. Srila Sanatana Goswami especially took the time to explain these concepts by writing the handbook for devotional service known as the Hari Bhakti Vilasa, which includes countless references to Vedic scriptures to support the guidelines and recommendations for behavior contained within. Deity worship has been around since the beginning of creation, even long before Krishna in his original form appeared on this earth. During the Treta Yuga, when his incarnation of Lord Rama roamed the earth, there was a Brahmana living in the kingdom of Ayodhya who had to see his beloved Rama every day before eating. A Brahmana is a member of the priestly class, so he spends all his time involved in religious affairs. Since he was the king of Ayodhya, Rama especially took care of the Brahmanas in the community. But since the Lord had administrative affairs to tend to, sometimes he had to go away on business, leaving the devoted Brahmana bereft of the nectar of the divine vision for certain extended periods of time. Rather than break his vow, the Brahmana simply didn't eat on days when he couldn't see Rama. When the Lord later found out about this, he felt greatly distressed as he was causing one of his devotees to suffer unnecessarily. Rama then told his younger brother Lakshmana to go to the Brahmana's home and install a set of Sita Rama deities. Indeed, this set of deities had existed in the royal family, the Ikshvakus, since even before Rama's appearance on earth. Thenceforth, the Brahmana simply viewed that statue of his beloved Rama, which was paired with the Lord's wife Sita Devi, every day and took this vision to be as good as viewing the Lord personally. This one incident illustrates the magic and potency of deity worship. The Aka Vigraha, the worshipable representation of the Supreme Lord in the material world, is meant to evoke the spiritual consciousness within the mind, an arousal which then leads to a consciousness that can guide all activities properly. Therefore, the worshipable form erected must be authorized and cannot be just any collection of wood and stone. The ordinary statue is an idol, but when the figure is authorized and fully empowered through its connection to the Supreme Lord, it turns into a deity. The Supreme Lord is certainly everywhere, but understanding his personal presence is very difficult, especially for the material eyes that are prone to worshipping anything that is not Krishna. It also doesn't help matters when bogus spiritual leaders try to use the Vedas as justification for their denial of devotional practices, which have deity worship as a cornerstone. Indeed, one must wonder what the motives are behind such a nefarious and dangerous viewpoint. Since deity worship is so effective and authorized, there can be no other reason for the willful neglect and erroneous teachings presented by the enemies of bhakti besides jealousy and hatred for the Supreme Lord. A non-devotee who studies the Vedas will never capture a complete understanding, as the first condition prevents the second. By following an authorized Akaya, one who understands the Bhagavad Gita and presents it as it is, there will be little chance of becoming a victim to the jealous practices of the miscreants. The deity is the sight for the vision that has become so through many lifetimes on earth. Bringing spiritual life to the otherwise dull and mundane material existence, the deity can help transport us back to the spiritual land, where the personal presence of Supreme Spirit can be felt and enjoyed at every single moment. Chapter 8. Listen to your heart.
Question. I understand that the Brahmanas are the brains of society and thus it is important to listen to the brain, but what role does the heart play? Isn't it equally as important? Should we listen to the heart or to the brain?
Answer. The famous caste system of India is technically known as Varnashrama Dharma. The term caste and the stigma attached to it are the result of a limited understanding of the purified system originally implemented by God. In the famous Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, states that he instituted the 4 Varnas and 4 Ashramas as a way for society to be divided up, with each person's corresponding category of Varna and Ashrama determined by their inherent qualities and the work they perform. Since Varnashrama Dharma is not such an easy concept to grasp for the layperson, analogies are used, with the most common one being to the body of a human being. The highest Varna or division in this system is the Brahmana. A Brahmana is a priest, a man of the cloth if you will. The word Brahmana means one who knows Brahman, or the impersonal aspect of creation. Sometimes spiritual leaders will say that we are all God or that God is part of us. These statements refer to the nature of Brahman, an impersonal aspect that pervades all of creation. We are all God in the sense that we are tiny sparks that emanate from the original spiritual fire, God. Since there is no difference between the spark and the original fire, the spirit souls can be considered to be the same as God. At the same time, there is still the original fire which exists separately and autonomously from the sparks. In this respect, God is always superior to and different from the Jiva souls. A person who knows Brahman understands the nature of the sparks emanating from the fire and how they are all equal in constitution. This is certainly a high level of understanding that is not acquired so easily. To learn discrete math, we have to go through years and years of training, studying for exams and solving complex equations. By the same token, understanding that all aspects of the creation, including matter and spirit, are part of one giant energy known as Brahman requires rigorous training of the body and mind. Through penance, austerity, and the study of scripture, a person can elevate themselves to the status of a Brahmana. Since the Brahmanas are so intelligent, they are well suited to act as society's teachers. While there are teachers for just about every subject and discipline, there needs to be a set of instructors for society as a whole, who can guide the activities of everyone for the betterment of every individual. The Brahmanas are the only people suited for this role, since they are the only ones who understand the constitutional position of all forms of life. The other 3 Varnas of the Varnashrama Dharma system are the Kshatriya, warrior administrator, Vaishya, merchant businessman, and Shudra, labor. While members of each of these divisions certainly do have positive characteristics, their knowledge is still considered inferior to that possessed by the Brahmanas. In order to help us better understand the system of Varnas, the Vedas often use the analogy of the body, with the Brahmanas taken as the brain. The brain can be considered the most important part of the body, for it directly guides the activities of the other parts. The arms, stomach and legs are certainly important, but these body parts need to know how to act. For example, the arms can involve the body in unnecessary fighting or in eating too much unhealthy food. The stomach can also fail to divert its nutrients to the proper parts of the body. The legs can carry the body to dangerous places, putting one's life in danger. In this regard, the brain is considered the most important because it is the decision maker. The Brahmanas are considered the brains of society because they are to guide the activities of everyone else. When this brain is absent, there is no chance of peace and prosperity. To finish the analogy, the Kshatriyas are the arms, the Vaishyas the stomach, and the Shudras the legs. The keen observer will notice that the heart is missing from this analogy. Is this an oversight on the part of the Vedas? After all, isn't the heart the most important aspect of the body? A person can be considered brain dead but still alive if the heart is beating. So who is the heart of society and who should we listen to, the heart or the brain? One thing we should remember is that Varnashrama Dharma is the system of maintenance for society. It is not the ultimate perfection of civilization or even of human life. Lord Chaitanya, Krishna's famous incarnation as a preacher, once posed questions relating to these issues to Ramananda Raya. The Lord asked him what he thought was the highest perfection of spiritual practice, and Ramananda Raya gave various replies, with Lord Chaitanya kindly rejecting each and every one as not being the most important aspect of spiritual life. Varnashrama Dharma was one of the replies that Ramananda Raya gave, but this was rejected by Lord Chaitanya as being subordinate to acquiring pure love for God. This conversation resulted in the conclusion that the ultimate objective in life is to go beyond rules and regulations by developing a pure love for God, similar to the way the gopis of Vrindavana used to love Krishna when he was on this earth some 5,000 years ago. Varnashrama Dharma and all the other rules and regulations of spiritual life are aimed at elevating one to this perfect consciousness, Krishna consciousness. Varnashrama Dharma doesn't specifically address the issue of the heart of society because the entire system is aimed at connecting with the heart. The heart of society and the universe for that matter is Krishna. He is the center of everything, the original fire, the spiritual sun if you will. Listening to the heart is the goal of human life, so obviously this heart is more important than the brain. Not only is Krishna the heart of society, but he is the heart in our body as well. Vedic information tells us that our identity comes from the individual soul residing within the heart. This soul or Atma remains unchanged even after death. This soul jumps from one body to another through the process of reincarnation, but it always remains the source of our identity. Yet this doesn't tell the whole story. In the hearts of every living entity there is another soul known as the Paramatma, which resides side by side with the Atma. This soul is super or param and it belongs to God. In order to take direction from the heart, to achieve pure Krishna consciousness, one must learn how to connect the individual soul with the supersoul. We see that taking direction from the heart is more important than following the dictates of the brain. This is something many of us understand already, for people commonly invoke the phrase, "I followed my heart instead of my brain," or something to this effect. The important point is that one must first know how to take direction from the heart. Since Krishna is the heart of the universe and the heart of our bodies, he is the one who should be guiding our activities. Yet we can't take direction from him unless and until we reach into our hearts and connect our soul with his. In order to achieve this union, we need the help of our trusted old friend, the brain. To illustrate this point, we need only look to one of the most famous religious books in the world, the Bhagavad Gita. Known as the Song of God, the Gita chronicles a discussion between a student and his teacher that took place on the eve of a great war. The student, the expert warrior Arjuna, was hesitant to fight against the opposing army. Not necessarily a conscientious objector, Arjuna was more distraught over having to fight against members of his own family who were fighting for the other side. Though the victor would earn the right to rule over a kingdom, Arjuna thought that such a reward wasn't worth the price that would have to be paid. Thinking that he was following his heart instead of his brain, Arjuna decided that he wouldn't fight and that he would lay down his weapons and let the other side win. This is where Lord Krishna, Arjuna's cousin, charioteer and dear friend, stepped in. Krishna also happens to be God, so that is why the discussion that followed became as famous as it did. Krishna informed Arjuna that he was grieving over the body, something which is not worth worrying about. Birth and death come on their own, but the spirit soul residing within doesn't change. The soul is never killed. Lord Krishna then provided a series of instructions and teachings, concluding with the most important instruction: just do everything for me. This is the ultimate objective for every person in life, to act in Krishna consciousness. At the end of their discussion, Arjuna decided to fight on, but to also remain detached from the outcome. He was fighting to carry out his prescribed duties as a Kshatriya, and also to carry out Krishna's orders. In the beginning of the Gita, Arjuna was listening to his emotions, generated from a heart which was temporarily disconnected from the ruler of the heart, the Supersoul, and emotionally attached to worldly objects. These emotions are part of the material body, a body which eventually gets discarded. These emotions are so strong that they can cause someone to think that they are following the dictates of the purified heart. When something is really heartfelt or coming out of the heart, it can only refer to things relating to spiritual life, for Krishna is the chief resident of the heart. How did Arjuna finally learn to take direction from a purified heart? He had a teacher, someone who acted as the brain from without. Arjuna was lucky enough to have God himself appear as the external teacher, but what about for the rest of us? Who can teach us how to take direction from the purified heart, the Supersoul connected with our soul? This is where the Brahmanas come in, more specifically the spiritual master or guru. The spiritual master is the big brain, someone who can help us detach our material emotions and get us attached to our spiritual inclinations towards serving the Supreme. In this age of Kali, bona fide Brahmanas are hard to find, so the instructions of all the great spiritual masters of the past have been synthesized into one short phrase: Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Chanting this one mantra is both a means and an end. In the beginning stages, it helps the individual draw the senses towards spiritual life, and in the mature stage it allows one to be totally in yoga, completely connected with the Supersoul residing within the heart. To help us in our yoga practice, the big brains, the Akayas, also advise that we refrain from the activities of meat-eating, gambling, illicit sex and intoxication. Along with bringing obvious negative side effects, these activities also cause a person to be more vulnerable to the effects of material emotions. Krishna's presence is so strong that he acts both as the heart and the brain of society. He is the core of all life, material and spiritual, and through his bona fide representatives, the spiritual masters, he is the greatest advisor and well-wisher to the conditioned souls. If we follow the instructions of the great Vaishnavas, devotees of Vishnu who automatically achieve Brahminical status, we can surely listen to our purified heart the same way that Arjuna did. This will benefit us both in this life and the next. Chapter 9: Self-Respect.
Question: those who really love God, they should not be egoists, since their whole personality is enveloped by the Lord's as they surrender to the Lord. Could you please tell me the difference between ego and self-respect?
Answer: according to Vedic information, the difference between the spiritual world and the material world is that the spiritual world is free of gunas. Gunas are material qualities, also known as modes. These gunas take shape through the gross material elements of earth, water, fire, air and ether, along with the three subtle elements of mind, intelligence and false ego. We see here that the term ego has a prefix false. When one reassumes their original spiritual position, the influence of their material qualities, gunas, is removed. While this mitigation occurs upon returning to the spiritual world, one can also become free of the effects of material nature while remaining in their present body. This state of bliss is achieved when one develops full Krishna consciousness, a state of mind where all thoughts are directed at God. When one achieves this consciousness, the false part of the ego is removed and true self-respect is acquired. Why does the living entity assume a false ego? Our constitutional position is that of a spirit soul, part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Lord Krishna is the same God that everyone worships, irrespective of faith or lack thereof. Even if one doesn't believe in God, it doesn't mean that the Lord doesn't exist. While learned scholars, transcendentalists, philosophers and mathematicians can ponder the various truths of life, there is one truth that is superior to all others. Since this truth explains every other truth, it is referred to as absolute. The Vedas, the oldest scriptures in existence, tell us that the supreme absolute truth is God and that He has an ever blissful form, full of sweetness. This original form of God has a name, Krishna. The living entities, the individual spirit souls, are part of Krishna, so they are the same in quality as God. Yet at the same time, their quantitative powers are far inferior. Hence they have no business pretending to act like God. The highest truth of all, the ultimate conclusion, is that the spirit soul is inconceivably and simultaneously one with and different from God. This conclusion is known as Asintya Bhed Bhera Tattva, and it was introduced to society by Lord Chaitanya, a preacher incarnation of God who appeared on earth around 500 years ago. Based on this definition, we see that the living entities are just like God, but that they are still different from Him. With this ultimate conclusion comes an ultimate relationship. That relationship is a loving one, where the living entities are in Krishna's company at all times. This association takes place in the spiritual world, where Krishna and his various non-different expansions reside. Not everyone worships God in the same way, so there are different moods of loving exchanges between the liberated souls and the Supreme Lord. So where does the material world fit into all of this? Why are we living apart from Krishna right now? The living entities at some point in time unknown to them, decided to separate from God. This re-emphasizes the inconceivable aspect of the ultimate conclusion. Why would the living entities want to separate from the Lord? To imitate Him, of course. That imitation is a sort of affront to the Lord's authority, a challenge. Since God is always God, no one can imitate Him in the spiritual world. In order for there to be competing gods, a world separate from the Supreme Lord is required. Ironically enough, Krishna is so kind that He Himself created a flawed replica of the spiritual world to serve this very purpose. This place, known as the material world, is where we currently reside. Here we are forced to go through the cycle of birth and death, reincarnation, for as long as our desire to imitate God continues. Upon reaching the material world, aside from assuming a body composed of material elements, the soul assumes a subtle body composed of mind, intelligence, and false ego. At this point, the false ego should be quite easy to understand. This ego is deemed false because it is not real, there is no justification for it. Ego refers to supremacy, pride, or the notion of I am God. At the time of birth, the mind is not consciously aware of this desire to be the God of mankind, but little by little we work our way towards that end. For example, the living entity is the master of the body, or at least we think. Since we decide when to wake up, sleep, eat, talk, move around, etc., we feel like we have control over our body and all its parts. In this respect, we can be deemed as the supreme controllers of the body, Ishwar. False ego begins to develop from this mindset, for according to Vedic information, we are actually not even masters of our own bodies. Krishna, through his expansion as the Supersoul, resides side by side with the individual soul in the heart. The individual soul makes the decisions as far as interactions with nature go, but it is the Supersoul who is responsible for the results of action. There are countless ways to illustrate this, but the simplest example comes from life and death. Many of us bemoan the fact that life isn't fair. Some people don't drink, smoke, or do drugs their whole life, and yet they meet an untimely death. Others take to dangerous activity, are overtly sinful, and yet live a very long life. Some people are born into wealth, while others struggle in poverty throughout their life. Some people get very good grades in school and then make little money as adults. Others goof off throughout their schooling years and yet end up being the source of the wealthiest companies in the world. Why do these differences exist? As great and powerful as we may take ourselves to be, we are not responsible for the results of our actions. The results are doled out by the Supersoul, who is the master of the administrators of the material world, the demigods. Karma, or fruitive activity, is completely fair. We may take a certain action and hope for a desired result, but others also take to fruitive activity. Once all these actions and reactions collide, the results vary. Karma is completely fair, so whatever results we have coming to us eventually will be realized. They may not come to us in this lifetime, but they certainly will manifest in a future one. These facts alone are enough to shed us of the false ego. We may be the controller of our own body, but the Supersoul resides inside of everyone. In this way, God is much more powerful than we are. The point of human life is to recognize God's supremacy and think of Him at all times. Those who think of Him all the way up until the time of death get to return to the spiritual world, never having to assume a material body again. The false ego gets removed and the real ego takes over. What is the real ego? The ideal relationship resulting from the Asintya Bhed Bhera Tattva philosophy is that of servant and master, friend and best friend, or lover and beloved. The two parties involved in this relationship are the living entity and Krishna. When a person realizes that Krishna is their best friend, the ultimate reservoir of pleasure, and the original proprietor of everything, then they have shed their false ego and assumed their real ego. This false ego is pretty easy to pick apart since every living entity is equal. What need is there to feel superior to anyone else if every person is meant to be God's devotee? In this way, we see that the pure devotees of Krishna possess humility and kindness. They never take themselves to be greater than anyone else. So what role does self-respect play in all of this? If we become humble devotees, does that mean we just sit around and avoid criticizing others, taking ourselves to be lesser individuals? The key component of self-respect is the self. When enveloped by the false ego, this self is taken to be the individual soul. But based on the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya, this self has a source, a supreme master. Lord Krishna or God is really the super self, the basis of our identity. If we base our self-respect off of Krishna, then there is no reason to avoid self-confidence. Devotees of Krishna are extremely confident in the instructions of the Lord and His bona fide representative, the spiritual master. While the goal of human life is to achieve Krishna consciousness at the time of death, this mindset cannot be adopted without the help of a spiritual master. A spiritual master or guru is essentially a teacher, one who instructs the puffed-up living entities on issues relating to the soul and the source of the real ego. Since the spiritual master must deal with conditioned living entities who possess false egos, they can't mince their words. Their teachings are bound to ruffle some feathers, i.e. offend some people. This is actually a good thing because if the conditioned living entities, those who want to imitate God's power of creating, maintaining and destroying, are flattered and told that their way of life is the right one, how will they make any progress in spiritual life? The spiritual master tells all living entities to give up their attachment to matter, their flawed desire to imitate God, and to take to devotional service or bhakti yoga. The ideal relationship is that of intimate association with the Lord, and this association can actually take place while one is in their present body. Since God is non-different from the living entities, He is able to expand Himself into other forms which are similar in quality to His original form. Lord Krishna's names are also expansions of the Lord, except that they are equally as powerful as the Lord Himself. Therefore, the Vaishnava Gurus advise everyone to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, as often as possible. For those who are serious about making progress in spiritual life, it is advised that they perform at least 16 rounds of chanting this mantra daily on a set of japa beads, along with abstaining from meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, and intoxication. It should be fairly obvious to anyone that these recommendations are bound to be met with opposition. Why do I have to chant so much? Why do I have to give up eating meat? Didn't God give man dominion over the animals? When confronted with this opposition, the Vaishnava spiritual masters confidently assert the supremacy of Bhakti Yoga and the teachings of Krishna found in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. This attitude shouldn't be mistaken to be egoistic or cocky. These great Acharyas like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, Bhaktivinoda Thakura, and A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada had no desire to offend anyone, nor did they think themselves superior to anyone else. Their teachings are considered flawless because they were originally handed down by people who followed Krishna's instructions. Only Krishna is flawless, hence one of his names is Asayutha, meaning one who never falls down. The Vaishnava saints are actually the most humble individuals. When they take others to task for their way of life, there is an underlying purpose. The Guru's mindset is essentially this: "O such and such person, you are very intelligent in material subjects. You are so dedicated to Maya, the illusory energy of Krishna, which has fooled you into adopting a false ego. If you simply shifted your efforts towards Krishna's service, you would be much happier. Not only would you be happier, but you could end up being a much greater devotee than me. I am a humble person simply doing my small part by trying to faithfully follow the teachings of my Guru. If you were to follow these same teachings, you could become a much better devotee and thereby make Krishna very happy." The Vaishnava saints have a very kind attitude, even if it manifests through words that may offend others from time to time. Their intention is certainly not to anger others. Anyone who has studied the great Vedic texts like the Ramayana and Srimad Bhagavatam knows that Vedic philosophy, because it emanates from Krishna, is the sum and substance of all philosophy. It is such a comprehensive spiritual discipline that one who understands it properly will actually understand every other philosophy that has ever existed, currently exists, or will ever exist in the future. Yet even armed with this knowledge, the Vaishnava saints don't look down at anyone. They know that every person is a devotee at heart, someone who simply needs to be cleansed of their contamination accumulated through association with matter. Goswami Tulsidas, the great poet and devotee of Lord Rama, an incarnation of Krishna, often addressed people of other faiths in his writings. Tulsidas' main prescription, as was Lord Chaitanya's, was the chanting of God's names. Through chanting this name, anyone could get whatever they wanted. Since God is everything, if we associate with Him, the reward we get is far greater than anything else that we could want. Tulsidas advised those who wished for earthly riches, those wanting to merge into the impersonal effulgence known as Brahman, those worshipping an all-pervading Great One God who is considered invisible, and even those wanting to negate all activity to simply chant Rama's name. Since chanting brings a person the direct association of the personal Supreme Lord, it clears all inferior desires, bringing the living entity the happiness it so desperately wants. A Vaishnava possesses a high level of intelligence as it relates to spiritual life, but this doesn't mean that there is any air of superiority or arrogance. One should certainly be humble, but this humility shouldn't stop a person from kindly telling others about Krishna. If we simply sit back and watch others continue to live in misery for fear of offending them, is that a good thing? If Krishna is perfect, then his teachings must also be. If his teachings are perfect, why shouldn't we kindly pass them on to others? The easiest way to transmit information about Krishna is through the chanting process. By regularly chanting Hare Krishna Hare Rama, others can begin to connect with God and slowly but surely shed their false ego. True self-respect comes from knowing that Krishna is our friend and ever well-wisher. Chapter 10 and Mercy for All.
Question. Though Lord Chaitanya is often considered the most merciful incarnation of Godhead, I cannot find references in the scriptures to his inclusion of women. How did Lord Chaitanya's mercy extend to women?
Answer. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is considered the most merciful incarnation of Godhead by those who have associated with him in one form or another. This opinion is reinforced by the fact that his divinity is only hinted at in a few scriptures, thus keeping his fame and glory limited. This was the wish of Lord Chaitanya, for he wanted to give glory and importance to Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Chaitanya is the only reputed incarnation of Godhead in recent times who openly told others not to worship him and to instead worship Krishna, Rama, or any other non-different form of Lord Vishnu. Due to his extreme kindness, generosity and tireless efforts to spread the holy names of the Lord around India, he was recognized for who he was, Krishna himself. His mercy extended to everyone in the world, including countless generations who never met him or were never alive during his time. This mercy most certainly extended to women as well. God is one. There can only be one Supreme Lord, otherwise there would be no God. If there were more than one God, then the concept of a supreme controller would be invalidated. Though there is only one God, he can take to countless forms and thus be addressed by an unlimited number of names. Just as there are multitudes of forms of living entities who each perform various activities, the Supreme Lord is also full of variegatedness. The material world is simply a shadow copy of the spiritual world. In order for there to be a shadow, there must be light. In the same way, in order for the world we live in to be considered a shadow, there must be an original realm, a universe which is full of light, energy and knowledge. This realm is eternal and self-illuminating, thus making it an appropriate home for the original personality of Godhead. According to Vedic information, the original name and form for God is Krishna. Lord Sri Krishna is the most attractive and most opulent, hence he is also known as Bhagavan. We individual souls are part and parcel of Krishna, but we always remain inferior to him. Part of our constitutional makeup consists of free will and independence. Though we are inferior to God, we have full independence in our choice of association. Those wanting to remain in the company of the all-attractive Lord are allowed to do so in the spiritual world. Those desiring separation also have their wishes fulfilled. The seed of this desire for separation is the flawed premise that God is equal to the individual soul. With the false premise comes the false conclusion of the individual being able to accurately imitate and hopefully surpass the Lord's abilities in the areas of creation, maintenance and destruction. Since both the premise and conclusion are false, the desires that result cannot be acted out upon in the spiritual realm, the origin of light, knowledge and truth. Rather, inferior activities require an inferior playing field. Thus the Lord kindly creates the material world, a place where the autonomous individual souls desiring separation are allowed to act out their hopes and dreams of imitating God. Though the individual soul is full of independence and free will, we see that this autonomy is limited in a sense. For instance, the Lord can never be directed to a false realm through any other entity's desires or demands. The individual souls, however, once cast into the temporary and miserable realm, remain there until their desires become purified. For the living entities, achieving this pure state is not very easy. So the Lord kindly descends to the temporary realm periodically to reinstitute the principles of religion and to aid the sincere souls in reclaiming their lost relationship with the Supreme. Dharma, in its context as the eternal spiritual occupational duty, was instituted in the material world by the Supreme Lord, so as to allow the individual souls who mistakenly wished for separation to return to the spiritual realm. In this way, we see the real meaning of religion. When adherence to this dharma is absent, the individual soul is tossed around from one body to another through the laws of karma, which are enforced through the workings of nature. Possessing a contaminated consciousness, the individual soul can transmigrate from one body to another, from that of a fish to a dog, or even to a human being. Dharma only applies to the human being since only man can understand the difference between matter and spirit, and the existence of a God. Therefore, the human form of life is considered the most auspicious. It represents the best chance for the conditioned soul to become liberated from the cycle of birth and death. The Avatara, or incarnation of Godhead, is a symbol of the all-merciful nature of the Supreme Lord. Dharma seems nice in theory, but its practical application is often difficult to realize. Therefore, to show others the true meaning behind Dharma, the Lord descends as an Avatara and makes good on the promises of the scriptures. Krishna's two most famous incarnations are Lord Rama and Lord Krishna himself, both of whom appeared on earth many thousands of years ago. Around 500 years ago, Krishna appeared on earth in a concealed incarnation who took on the role of a preacher. When God comes to earth as a human being, he usually assumes the role of a warrior. This allows him to provide protection to the innocent and those practicing devotional service, or Bhagavata Dharma. Krishna is Bhagavan, and one who takes to worshipping him is known as Bhagavata. Those who take their dharma, or ultimate occupational duty in life, to be devotion to Bhagavan, thus become adherents to Bhagavata Dharma. The Lord is usually neutral towards all forms of life because everyone has as their original sin, so to speak, the desire to imitate him. Since this desire is based off a false premise, the Lord has no liking or disliking of any particular conditioned entity. The devotees, however, ultimately realize the flawed nature of the material world and thus take to devotional service. Through this sincere desire, they become endeared to the Lord, who then takes it upon himself to ensure that their devotional practices go on uninterrupted. Around 500 years ago, the practices of the Vaishnavas were being tainted by the onset of Kali Yuga, or the dark age of quarrel and hypocrisy. Followers of the Vedas were mostly taking to the monist philosophy known as Mayavada. This philosophy concludes that the individual souls are God themselves, but that they are simply unaware of it. Mayavada actually represents the nadir of material existence, the lowest stage of thinking that a person can descend to. Even an animal life is considered more beneficial than a human life, which is mired in the mindset of Mayavada. The animals, in all their ignorance, would still never dare think themselves to be God. God is May is an accurate statement, but I am God certainly is not. If we are God, how did we end up in a conditioned state where we had to wear diapers in our early years of life? The monist thinking is surely foolish, yet due to the influence of Kali Yuga, the Mayavada philosophy became quite prominent in India around 500 years ago. Along came Lord Chaitanya, a preacher incarnation of Krishna, to re-establish the real meaning of Dharma, the ultimate conclusion of life. Lord Chaitanya, who assumed the guise of a Brahmana or one in the priestly order, established the ultimate conclusion of Asantya Bhedbheda Tattva, which states that the individual souls are simultaneously one with and different from the Supreme Lord. They are equal to God in the sense that everything spiritual and material is part of the Lord's energy. God can never be separated from his energies, thus the individual souls always remain part of the definition of God. At the same time, the individuals are not nearly as powerful as the Supreme, so they remain inferior to him at all times. Lord Chaitanya was unique in that he openly preached his philosophy to anyone who would listen. He taught the truth of simultaneous oneness and difference through the congregational chanting of the holy names of God, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In order to expand his preaching efforts, Lord Chaitanya took to the renounced order of life, sannyasa. He left his wife and mother at home and roamed around India as a mendicant to give his mercy to anyone who was willing to hear the holy name. As a sannyasi, Lord Chaitanya strictly forbade himself from associating with women. The sincere women who wanted to associate with him were advised to offer their obeisances from afar. Lord Chaitanya's sannyasi associates were also prohibited from having intimate association with women. Does this mean that Lord Chaitanya wasn't merciful to women? To understand Lord Chaitanya's behavior, we have to understand the intricacies of the renounced order. The aim of human life is to rid ourselves of the desire to imitate God. This is done through rekindling our loving feelings towards Him. These feelings are aroused through the performance of devotional service. At the same time, our attachment to material nature is very strong. Attachment to sex life, the desire to associate with the opposite sex or the desire to act on the urges of the genitals is the strongest. Therefore, the entire Vedic system, dharma if you will, is focused on helping the individual break free of this attachment. From the time of birth all the way up until death, there are specific rules, regulations and recommendations aimed at achieving the ultimate goal of life, Krishna consciousness. Those who are God conscious at the time of death get to ascend to the spiritual world, wherefrom they never have to return. Sannyasa is the last stage of life. It is the spiritual institution where a person renounces everything except for service to Krishna. We can think of it as a purified form of retirement. When one is advanced in age, it means that death is coming closer. Therefore, it becomes vitally important to adjust one's behavior at this time to increase God consciousness. Strict sannyasa life can involve many different facets, but the most important regulation is the abstention from association with women. It is not divorce per se, but the husband separates from the wife permanently, leaving her in the care of the adult aged children. This way the dependents are taken care of, leaving the man free to devote all his time towards pleasing Krishna. Lord Chaitanya certainly didn't need to take sannyasa. As the original personality of Godhead himself, he was untainted by Maya, or the illusory energy governing the material world. Sex life is considered the greatest impediment towards spiritual enlightenment, the root cause behind the perpetual cycle of reincarnation. When sex life is used for begetting God-conscious children, it is not tainted, but sex for any other purpose certainly is harmful. Therefore, sex life is extremely regulated under the system of dharma instituted by Krishna. Though the restriction on association with women helps a transcendentalist escape the pitfalls of sex life, sannyasa actually has two other more important benefits, both of which apply to the area of preaching. The first benefit to sannyasa is that of mobility. Who among us wouldn't like to travel the world and visit different places? What keeps us from doing this? Obviously, our jobs, livelihoods and family life keep us tied down. These three things bind us to our current location and limit our mobility. By taking to sannyasa, one gives up their mundane work and attachment to family and home. In this way, sannyasis are free to roam about the world. To meet the basic demands of the body, they must beg. It is strange in a sense that the highest stage of spiritual enlightenment involves begging for a living. Again, this facilitates the mobility aspect and also maintains the humility of the devotee. If we are humble at the time of death, we are more likely to think of the maintainer, the true provider for our sustenance, Sri Krishna. Now, of course, there are some who abuse this system of charity and benevolence for their own benefit. They take to sannyasa so that they don't have to work for a living. But the Vedas didn't overlook this potential for abuse, for they even accounted for such a cheating mindset. The rules of sannyasa are very strict, especially when it comes to the area of begging. A sannyasi isn't supposed to go to a home where he is expected to get plenty of food. Moreover, he is not to take more than he needs for that particular meal. In the sannyasa ashrama, there is no concept of stocking up food for a rainy day. There really isn't anywhere to put the reserve food anyway, since the mendicant has no fixed place of residence. On the next day of begging, the sannyasi is to pick a new home, a place he hasn't visited recently. Goswami Tulsidas, the great Vaishnava poet and devotee of Lord Rama, took to the renounced order of life and really had no problem adhering to this system of begging. In fact, in his Dohavali he mentions that his life was peaceful when he lived simply off begging. But as soon as he gained a little fame due to the popularity of his poetry, his peaceful life became disturbed. This was because people started offering him so many gifts, including food, as thanks for his wonderful poetry in praise of Rama. When one eats too much, their digestive balance gets altered. This imbalance negatively affects other areas of life as well. Tulsidas was a little agitated that his sannyasa lifestyle was altered due to the abundance of food he was receiving. This is a little humorous in a sense, since it shows that no good deed goes unpunished. People loved Tulsidas so much that they didn't want him to have to beg for anything. They were willing to give the world to him as thanks for his praise of Sri Rama. Lord Chaitanya faced similar issues, as many well-wishers would often donate loads of sumptuous food to him. The wives of his associates would prepare the most tasty sweets and prasadam meals and then offer them to him when they would see him. The other more important benefit to sannyasa is gravitas or reputation. A first-class sannyasi is a preacher. He goes door to door begging for food, and in exchange he offers the householder sound words of advice from the Vedas. The ultimate instruction in the Vedas is that one should be attached to God instead of material nature. This message is so powerful and rooted in logic that anyone can preach it. Krishna consciousness is not dependent on any outward dress or position in life. Whether a person is a man, woman, child, sannyasi, or householder, they are equally as eligible for returning back home, back to Godhead. Yet, as we all know, anyone who takes to preaching or teaching is bound to be up for scrutiny. Leeches, naysayers, and the lowest of mankind don't want to surrender unto the Supreme Lord. Since their ultimate conclusions are not based on any logical truths or reality, they have no way to cut down the arguments of the bona fide preachers. Therefore, they will take to ad hominem attacks, going after the character of those preaching the message of universal love and respect for Krishna. Ad hominem attacks are most prevalent in the arena of politics. Such tactics are deemed fallacies because they don't tackle the issues in question. For example, if person A says be devoted to Krishna, and person B counters with, person A is fat and thus can't be trusted, they haven't really addressed the claims made by person A in the same way. The message of the Vedas is pure and uncontaminated, so anyone who teaches it to others surely is doing the greatest service to mankind. Yet others will undoubtedly take to attacking their character as a way of cutting down arguments. In the political arena, the attacks often focus on the friends and family members of the people running for office. So has a daughter who had a child out of wedlock. Such and such person was involved in extramarital affairs. Such and such person doesn't know how many homes they own. Such and such person is too young. In a similar manner, non-devotees will attack devotees of Krishna for being attached to family life, work and women. The sannyasa ashrama provides the best possible insulation from these attacks. You can't attack someone for being attached to sex life if they live as a mendicant without any family. You can't attack someone for being attached to fruitive activity if they don't work for anyone. You can't attack someone for being attached to vanity and material possessions if they have a shaved head and walk around wearing a saffron robe. The only instances where personal attacks aren't necessarily fallacies is when they relate to hypocrisy. If a political figure or preacher says one thing, but then doesn't abide by their own teachings, it takes away from their message and the honesty of their character. Sannyasa gave Lord Chaitanya gravitas amongst the other sectors of society. Lord Chaitanya obviously didn't need to renounce anyone or anything for his own salvation, but since he wanted to teach others about Krishna consciousness, he wanted to establish a good reputation. Goswami Tulsidas' wife sternly rebuked him one time for being too attached to her. Taking her words to heart, Tulsidas immediately accepted the renounced order of life and never looked back. A sannyasi is strictly prohibited from having intimate association with women, for adherence to this restriction is the greatest source of their gravitas next to the actual message they are preaching. Lord Chaitanya associated with many other devotees and granted them his mercy. Though he stayed away from women in public, he still encountered a few every now and then. Most of them were wives of his close friends and associates. The Vedas instruct us to view every woman except our own wife as our mother. What's ironic is that a woman actually once touched Lord Chaitanya by accident when he was a sannyasi. She was in the temple of Lord Jagannatha, and since she was so eager to see the deity, she climbed on top of a column to get a better view. In so doing, her feet accidentally touched Lord Chaitanya. The Lord's associates thought that he would get angry over such an offense, but instead, he appreciated the woman's level of devotion. This shows that Sri Gaurhari certainly didn't exclude women from the practice of devotional service. A stereotype attached to Vedic life is that women are somehow subjugated or treated as second-class citizens. This couldn't be further from the truth. The subjugated term is quite humorous in a sense. Any individual soul who is trapped in a material body is referred to as Dehanam in Sanskrit, which means embodied. This speaks to the fact that there is no concept of freedom in the material world. Free will is a characteristic of the soul, but the results of free action are in the hands of the divine forces. Every person, man, woman, animal, plant, etc., is a slave to the forces of nature. This is evidenced by the fact that none of us can control the time of our death. We have no idea when death will come, nor do we know any way to stop it. Even though every living entity is embodied, they take on different material qualities based on past work and desire. Therefore, each person has natural activities they are suited for, and if these activities are performed in accordance with dharma, one remains completely on the liberated path. For women, their dharma is to stay under the protection of their father, husband, or eldest son. For the men, their duty is to provide complete protection to their dependents, which include wives and children. At first glance, this seems like a sort of slavery or forced dependence. As mentioned before, there is no such thing as independence in an embodied form. Rather, true independence can only come from dependence on the right entity. Society is at peace when the Brahmanas, the priestly class, are completely dependent on Krishna for everything. The king is then dependent on the Brahmanas, the male head of the family on the king, the wife on the husband, the child on the mother, etc. In this way, there is an intricate chain of dependency that has at its root the Supreme Lord. Vedic literature is full of examples of chaste and devoted women who had complete knowledge on spirituality and devotion to Krishna. Though women such as Kunti Devi, Sita Devi, Savitri, and Arundhati were all subjugated under today's definition, they were completely independent in their thoughts and deeds. True independence comes from dependence on the Lord. The modern-day notion of independence has only led to disaster for both men and women. The women are now left to be exploited by the men wanting easy sex life, and the men are tied down to worldly life due to their unsatisfied sexual desires. In the Vedic system where the men and women know their roles in marriage, there is ample time for spiritual life and the acquisition of knowledge pertaining to the soul and the meaning of life. Goswami Tulsidas states that when the servant properly serves the master, they actually surpass the master in stature. As an example, he points to the fact that Lord Hanuman leaped over the ocean to Lanka while Lord Rama walked across a bridge. Lord Rama, a famous incarnation of Krishna, had to rescue his wife Sita Devi from the island kingdom of Lanka. Enlisting the help of a band of Vanaras, Rama was able to have a bridge constructed which allowed him to cross the ocean and take on Sita's captor Ravana in battle. Sri Hanuman, the most faithful and dear servant of Rama, had previously leapt his way to Lanka and found Sita's whereabouts. Since Hanuman was the most sincere servant, Rama allowed him to become more exalted than himself. This is the secret behind devotional service. When we declare full dependence on the Lord, He actually takes the necessary steps to make us greater than Himself. This is all done through His effort. Lord Chaitanya, though a sannyasi who avoided the association of women, established that the highest practitioners of Bhakti Yoga are the gopis of Vrindavana. This is not a mistake. Lord Chaitanya declared that the most exemplary devotees, those we should all model our services after, are cowherd girls, those who are considered unintelligent by the material estimation. Since the gopis of Vrindavana renounced everything and everyone, including their husbands, in favor of serving Krishna, their love for him remains unmatched. Since they completely became dependent on Krishna for everything, they became fully independent in their love. The gopis' love for Krishna is so strong that not even Krishna himself can stop them from serving him. Usually we engage in loving service to please someone else. In spiritual life, the person we are trying to please is Krishna. So it would make sense that if he asked us to stop serving him, we'd listen. The gopis, however, are so convinced of the superiority of loving service to the Lord that even when Krishna tries to stop them for whatever reason, they refuse. Though Lord Chaitanya abided by the regulations of the sannyasa order to maintain the good standing of his preaching, his mercy still reached everyone. Anyone who has ever chanted Hare Krishna has received the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. The true depth of his love for humanity can never fully be known, but the more we understand him, the more we will realize just how kind and merciful he was. Many Brahmanas of his time did not like his teaching methods. Krishna is known as Brahmanya Devai, or the god of the Brahmanas. Since Lord Chaitanya was freely distributing love for Krishna to all of society, many Brahmanas did not like that they had to now share Krishna with others. Thus Lord Chaitanya was often criticized and ridiculed by the unintelligent. In order to maintain the good name of his movement, Lord Chaitanya took care to always display exemplary behavior. This ensured that as many people as possible would take to the chanting of the holy names of the Lord, the only effective religious practice for this age. Any person, regardless of their race or gender, can receive Lord Chaitanya's mercy by chanting the names of Krishna and Rama, and by hearing about God's wonderful pastimes found in books like the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Sri Gaurhari is the most merciful incarnation of Godhead, and his mercy is for everyone. Thank you for reading. All content authored by Sonal Pathak.